Chapter 1. An Unexpected Sealing. A long time ago, a demon fox with 9 tails existed. When these tails were swung, they could destroy a mountain and cause a tsunami. To counter it, the villagers gathered some ninjas. On the battlefield, the Anbu, Jounin, and Chunnin of Kanehagakure no Sato were going all out in their fight against the great Kyubi no Yoko. The forest in which they were fighting was littered with the heavily beaten dead bodies of ninjas. Many of these bodies were torn apart, others were crushed into the ground from being stepped on by the great fox or partially eaten. Among the many casualties were men, women, and children who weren't shinobis, and this was to continue if Kyubi wasn't stopped. "We have to hold it off until Yondaime arrives," yelled on the injured Jounin before he charged back into fighting Kyubi. "Don't let it get closer to the village," yelled another injured Jounin, kneeling down to catch his breath before he also charged back into action. Moments later, a giant reddish-brown toad known as Gamabunta was seen making its way through the forest toward the great red 9-tailed fox, with a most familiar blonde-haired shinobi dressed and geared like a Jounin standing on its head, wearing a white trench coat with flame designs on the bottom of the coat. This shinobi's presence was a sight for sore eyes to everyone who saw him, except Kyubi. This shinobi was Namikaze's Minato, also known as Yondaime Hokage. The great 9-tailed fox growled viciously as he stared straight at Yondaime. Seeing the fox in range, Yondaime began performing a series of complex hand seals, beginning the process of sealing the fox away. The Kyubi, however, dashed at Gamabunta in the attempt to kill Yondaime. Seconds before the Kyubi reached Yondaime, however, a brilliant flash of white light blanketed the forest, blinding all who were there. After several moments, the great light died out, returning sight to everyone. Kyubi no Kitsune, Gamabunta, and Yondaime were nowhere to be seen. The fighting was over and Kyubi was finally defeated, but at a great cost. Meanwhile, Sarutobi Hiruzen, also known as Sandaime Hokage, was in an undisclosed chamber with a crying newborn infant boy resting on a cushion on the ground with candles ceremonially arranged around him. 3 Umbu were also present with Sarutobi. Hiruzen suddenly sensed a very strong chakra making its way toward the baby. He sighed sadly to himself, knowing that Yondaime successfully performed the forbidden sealing jutsu, which cost him his life. The chakra suddenly burst into the chamber and made its way into the baby's stomach. Seeing this chakra, however, alarmed Hiruzen. The chakra being infused into the baby wasn't red as anticipated. Instead, this very strong chakra was blue, and it gave off a most familiar aura. With a flash, the blue chakra was completely infused into the baby boy, thus completing the sealing. The baby was still crying with a seal on his belly glowing in a majestic blue glow. Hiruzen hurried over to the baby and saw that a most unexpected event had just taken place. "Oh my," the shocked Hiruzen spoke quietly. "This was most unexpected. How could this have happened?" One of the Anbu stormed into the chamber and went over to Hiruzen. "Sandaime-sama, Kyubi is gone, and so is Yondaime Hokage. The sealing was a success, yes?" Hiruzen sighed to himself and spoke. "Yes, it was a success. However, the Kyubi wasn't the one that was sealed into Naruto." This revelation greatly alarmed the Umbu who were present.
"Sandaime-sama.
You mean the Kyubi is still out there?" "I don't know what became of Kyubi, however I know what became of Yondaime." The Anbu wanted anxiously for Sarutobi's answer. "He was sealed away into his own son." A week later, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the reinstated Sandaime Hokage, was sitting in his office with reports from all of the Anbu, Jounin, and Chunnin, who gave their detailed reports about the event of Kyubi's attack. The casualties of the attack were catastrophic, and the body count and searches for missing people were still in progress. Many lost their lives that night, from men, women, and children, and many of Konoha's best shinobis. Many were left as orphans, widows, or widowers. The physical, mental, and emotional damages done to Konoha left countless traumatized. Some homeless because their homes were destroyed, others without families, and everyone grief-stricken for the horrific event that befell them for reasons unknown. Still, they had to move on with their lives, or what was left of it, and look to a hopefully better future. As Hiruzen continued with his paperwork, He turned his attention to the now sleeping Naruto, who was resting peacefully in his crib. He sighed in wonder about how Yondaime Hokage ended up being sealed into his own son with a jutsu that was meant to seal and imprison the Kyuubi no Yoko into Naruto. He had no idea what could have transpired seconds before the Kenjutsu went into effect. But if anything was certain, Kyuubi was gone, and there have been no reports about the Great Fox's presence anywhere, much to everyone's relief. Getting off his chair, Sandaime went over to the sleeping baby. Looking down at the blonde-haired child in wonder as he wondered to himself, "Yondaime, exactly what happened during your fight with Kyuubi? How did it end up that you were sealed away? And what became of that nine-tailed monstrosity?" Sarutobi continued to look down at the child in wonder as he recalled what happened a few hours after Kyuubi's defeat. Flashback. A week ago. It's been 2 hours since Kyuubi's defeat, and the aftermath was taking its effect on the people. Meanwhile, Sandaime was in the meeting chamber with all of the advisors and clan leaders. The Umbu who were in the undisclosed chamber earlier with Hiruzen were also present and standing guard. Naruto was currently sleeping quietly in Sandaime's arms. They were discussing the issues concerning Yondaime's only living son and heir, and what they must do with him. Sarutobi had just finished explaining in detail what happened to Yondaime and how he was sealed into his newborn son's body. Needless to say, they were left speechless. After a long moment of silence, Hayashi broke the silence. "Are you truly serious, Sandaime-sama?" "I'm very serious," Hiruzen replied. The Kenjutsu Yondaime performed was meant to seal Kyuubi into Naruto and ultimately claim Yondaime's life for performing the Kenjutsu. However, for reasons yet to be known, Yondaime himself ironically fell victim to his own jutsu and was sealed away into his own son. There are numerous possibilities of the effects the sealing of Yondaime into Naruto will have on the young boy as he grows up. For what it's worth, Naruto is practically a born Hokage. Sarutobi looked around as the advisors and clan leaders murmured with each other about what they were just told. The thought of a newborn infant being infused with everything that made Yondaime Hokage a most powerful and feared shinobi in the shinobi world was unreal. But it was said clear by the Sandaime Hokage himself. The possibilities and potentials for this child of Yondaime-sama are almost limitless, Hayashi acknowledged. In some respects, Namikaze's Naruto is Yondaime-sama's reincarnation. "You might see it that way," Sandaime said. "However, Naruto is Minato's son, not Minato reborn in spite of the situation the child is in. The child possesses great powers passed down from father to son in a strange twist," spoke Koharu. Nodding, Hiruzen stated, "which is also why he's in grave danger should enemy nations and villages learn of Minato being sealed within his own son. One of two extremes could happen. Enemy nations and villages would seek to either kill the child or most likely kidnap him in order to raise and train him to be part of their nation and turn him against us. The results would prove disastrous to Konohagakure should they corrupt Minato's legacy. Naruto will need protection of the highest level." Hiruzen looked at all of the clan leaders and advisors conversing with each other about what could be done for Naruto. A couple of minutes later, Hayashi spoke, "Sandaime-sama, with all due respects, I request permission to adopt and raise Minato's heir, establishing him as part of the main house of the Hyuga family." On hearing those words, Sarutobi contemplated what could happen should he entrust the tutelage and upbringing of Naruto to one of the clan leaders. Seeing their faces, he noted that each of them, even Hamura and Koharu, were more than willing to adopt and raise Yondaime's only son without question. From what he was visualizing about Naruto's possible upbringing under their wings, however, the results looked anything but appealing. When he visualized what could happen if Naruto was raised by Hayashi, as part of the main branch, he saw Naruto learning a lot from the Hyuga clan as a whole. It was true that Naruto would have been trained in the best arts. However, Hayashi's harsh and cold demeanor was no secret to Sarutobi, and he also saw Naruto adopting and mirroring such a demeanor. Combining that with being trained in the arts of the Hyugas and Minato's arts of combat, Naruto would turn out ruthless and look at everyone else being inferior to him. Not good qualities for a Hokage. Looking at the clan leader of the Uchihas, Sarutobi also saw Naruto learning a great deal from them. Like the Hyuga clan, however, the Uchiha clan was a proud clan because of the power behind their bloodline limit, and because of their arrogance, he saw Naruto having fierce rivalries with Uchiha prodigies and seeking to prove who'd come out as the dominate figure, especially since Naruto didn't possess their bloodline limit or anyone else's for that matter. With the Nara clan, he saw Naruto becoming a more strategic and deadlier killer since the Nara clan was known for being very skilled in efficient tactics and battle strategies, especially with their ability to manipulate their shadows. After a long mental deliberation, Hiruzen said, "I honestly appreciate your open-minded thoughtfulness in being willing to adopt the child Hayashi. However, I must respectfully decline the offer." Hayashi's eyes widened upon hearing this and spoke, "Sandaime-sama, Naruto possesses great potentials to become one of Konoha's strongest shinobis, and with him under my tutelage, he would become one of the greatest prodigies and Hokages ever produced by Konoha. I acknowledge your good intentions for the child Hayashi and for anyone else here who's willing to take the responsibilities of taking Naruto under their wings." Sandaime sighed and continued, "However, Naruto needs balance in his life. He's already been infused with a powerful Hokage whose knowledge, wisdom, stamina, and abilities will possibly be absorbed into the child in a gradual process as he grows up, no doubt. Because of this, he'll need someone to balance him. For the best intentions of the child, I'll dispatch one of the ANBU here to locate someone of my choosing to raise and teach Minato's heir." Hayashi reluctantly remained silent. Now wasn't the time to argue with the reinstated Hokage, especially after everything that transpired before and after Kyuubi's attack. "Are we to inform the villagers about Yondaime's surviving heir?" asked Hamura. "No," Hiruzen replied firmly with no hint of hesitation in his voice. "Should the people learn that Namake's Naruto is Minato's only son, chances of Naruto being spoiled and pampered by the villagers would be unquestionably high. The child would grow up to be ungrateful and show little appreciation for the things given to him. The results, however, would be the opposite should he learn to earn what's rightfully his than to simply hand his inheritance over to him. Plus, you have to remember that Minato has made a lot of enemies in many lands, villages, and possibly other continents. And as I mentioned before, should enemy villages learn of Yondaime having an heir infused with Minato himself, the results would prove disastrous for both the child and the entire village of Konoha." Everyone in the chamber allowed Sandaime's wisely chosen words to be absorbed as they thought about what he said. "For this reason," Hiruzen continued, "the child's name will be changed. He will adopt the maiden name of his mother as Minato instructed before his battle with Kyuubi. His new name will be Uzumaki Naruto. Everyone will be told that Minato and his entire family have died as a result of Kyuubi's attack. When Naruto grows up and reach a level of maturity that I see appropriate with the ability to look after himself, he will be given everything that belongs to his family and with the truth about his heritage being publicly explained to the people." Everyone present nodded their heads in understanding. Hiruzen remained silent momentarily as he allowed everyone to let his words sink into their minds. With a more serious and firm tone, Hiruzen continued, "Until that time, no one here is make any mention to anyone outside the council regarding the truth about Naruto's true heritage without my or Naruto's consent. If these words of mine are not honored, the act will be regarded as treason, and the punishment will be severe. This is my law as the reinstated Hokage." The ANBU, clan leaders and advisors knew not to take Sandaime's words lightly, especially if they didn't want to incur his wrath. End flashback. Sarutobi sighed again as he thought about what happened after the meeting. Flashback. A week ago. Hiruzen, 3 hours after the meeting with the advisors and clan leaders, had called the grand assembly of everyone in Konoha. Many in attendance could only wonder what Hiruzen had to tell them in regards to Kyuubi no Yoko's attack and defeat. Many murmurings were circulating around the assembly until Sandaime appeared on the roof of Hokage Tower calling everyone to attention. The people immediately quieted after seeing Sandaime Hokage take the stage. "People of Konohagakure no Sato," Sandaime addressed everyone, "as you all are well aware, a great monster known as Kyuubi no Yoko have attacked our village for reasons unknown to us. Sadly, many of our people and shinobis have lost their lives in battling the Kyuubi and many parts of our village have been left in ruins. It grieves me deeply that such a terrible event of such evil have befell us." Hiruzen paused for a moment as he looked over at everyone in the audience. Taking a breath, he continued, Kyuubi would have continued its rampage had it not been for the sacrifice made by Yondaime Hokage, who vanished and died moments after defeating Kyuubi no Yoko. It also grieves me to inform all of you that Yondaime's honorable wife, Namikaze Kushina, also died during the attack. Again Sandaime paused and looked at the faces of everyone who was there. He knew how everyone loved his successor Yondaime and his wife Kushina, and Sandaime was no exception. The villagers knew his wife was pregnant and were really looking forward to the birth of Yondaime's child with high expectations. Although it was true that Minato's wife died, however, it grieved him that he had to make everyone believe that both Minato and his child were dead, but it was for Naruto's own protection. Hiruzen continued, Yes, the loss of Minato and his family is indeed a great loss, and with all those who lost their lives on this tragic night. But their deaths were not in vain. Minato and all of the brave shinobis and citizens of Konohagakure who died gave their lives to protect the village and everyone they held dear to them. Their deaths, therefore, were honorable and ought to be commemorated. In spite of all that has happened here on this night, the fact that the village is still in existence testifies to the shining will of fire that burns in all of us. A fire that will not go out into the shadows of the night by enemy's forces. Tonight's events have proven this truth to all of us. Although we can never bring back the lives of those who were lost in the battle, however, we can honor their sacrifices and losses by rebuilding Konohagakure no Sato for a brighter tomorrow. In this way, the next generation of Konoha and all future generations to follow will learn of the great things that their people and ancestors have done for them and their village and proudly carry their spirits and fiery will of the village. The villagers all burst into applause after hearing Sandaime's words to them. Needless to say, the people took all that he said to heart. End flashback. Sarutobi snapped out his thoughts when a knock came from the door. Yes? You can come in. The door opened, revealing a masked Anbu standing at the door. Sandaime-sama. The Anbu spoke as he bowed in respects. The one whom you have sent for has arrived. Hiruzen nodded his head to the Anbu, giving him permission to allow the visitor to enter his office. The visitor stepped into the office with the Anbu stepping out and leaving the office, giving privacy to both Sandaime and his guest, who didn't have a happy facial expression. Sandaime knew that this meeting wasn't going to be a smooth sailing one. Chapter 3. A Reluctant Return. Sandaime and his guest looked at each other momentarily, with no words being exchanged between them. After a brief moment of silence between the two of them, Sandaime spoke, Senju Tsunade, it's been a long while. Yes, it has, Sarutobi-sensei, Tsunade replied to her former sensei. She was currently in her late 30s and was known by many as the Sucker, one of the legendary Sannin. Tsunade remarked, The Umbu you sent to find me told me that a terrible event happened in here a week ago. Judging from the damages and the looks on the people's faces, I'd say a lot more has happened than what the Umbu was willing to let on. Hiruzen. He also told me that there was another major issue at hand here that was a matter of the utmost importance that requires my presence before you. He wouldn't tell me what it was, saying that only you alone could tell me since it was highly confidential for only my ears to hear. Momentarily paused. In truth, I truly didn't want to return to this village again, although I reluctantly did so since you personally requested my audience. Hiruzen sighed. I understand that a great deal has happened in your life which caused you to grow bitter towards your home village, and I won't make any excuses about it. Before Tsunade said another word, her eyes caught sight of a baby's crib that was at the side of Hiruzen's office. Curiously, she went over to the crib and looked inside of it, seeing a week-old baby boy sleeping peacefully inside. Her mood started to lighten up upon seeing the child. Smiling at the newborn, she asked her former sensei, Who's the cute blonde-haired infant? Certainly he can't be your grandchild, yes. You're right, he's not my grandchild, Hiruzen replied. His name is Naruto and he's Yondaime's son and heir. The Sannin's eyes widened in surprise upon hearing those words. Minato had a kid, Tsunade said in surprise and happily. Speaking of Minato, where is he and his wife Kushina? Is Yondaime out on some diplomatic business trip in another village with you covering for him here? especially after everything that's happened? And where's the boy's mother? Tsunade saw a certain look on Sarutobi's face, which was a bad omen. Tsunade, Hiruzen started. I humbly ask for you to adopt Minato's child. That was when she looked at her former sensei was if he lost his mind. You want me to do what? Tsunade shouted, causing Naruto to wake up and start crying. Hiruzen sighed again as he went over to Naruto, lifting him out of his crib and into his arms, eventually calming the child. Adopt Minato's son? Tsunade asked in disbelief. Have you lost your mind? Exactly where is Minato and his wife? Tsunade, Hiruzen replied, quickly cutting Tsunade off. Please calm yourself down, Tsunade. In a calmer tone, he suggested, take a seat, Tsunade. There's something that I have to tell you. Sad to say, you're not going to like what you're going to hear. Having no other option, Tsunade pulled up a seat and sat down as her former sensei advised. Hiruzen pulled his office seat over towards his former student and sat down on it with Naruto still cradled in his arms. Hiruzen began explaining, a week ago, the great monster known as Kyuubi no Yoko came and attacked the village. Days before the monster's attack, however, Minato received word from one of his top shinobi about Kyuubi's eventual arrival to Konoha. As you're well aware, Tsunade, Kyuubi's existence was no myth to Konohagakure even before its attack. The people knew what the monster was capable of doing after hearing many stories about the beast's power. Many, however, couldn't understand why Kyuubi was coming to attack Konoha, killing and destroying everything in its path as it made its way to our village. Minato worked night and day trying to find ways of stopping the creature, but had little success. It was a profound burden for him, and the fact that his wife was about to go into premature labor because of the heavy stress and frustration both of them were in wasn't helping. In truth, the villagers knew that Minato was married to a most skilled kunoichi who was pregnant with their child. What they don't know is that she went into labor prematurely because of the intense stress both her and her husband were in on the night of Kyuubi's attack. She was secretly rushed to a private medical tent during the attack where to gave birth to their son. Sadly though, because of his wife's severe emotional distress and weakened condition, Kushina died shortly after giving birth to Naruto, and the news of his wife's death devastated Minato. Tsunade was already feeling her tears building up in her eyes before they started falling free down her face. Sarutobi continued, and what severely added more pain to Minato was the ancient Kinjutsu Ugi he finally found to seal away and imprison the Kyuubi no Yoko. The beast, however, was too powerful to be contained in any inorganic vessel or animal. This Kinjutsu Ugi required a newborn human child whose umbilical cord was freshly cut, and there was no other child born that night except his own. In performing the Kinjutsu, the sealer would have to surrender his or her life for the Kinjutsu Ugi to take its effects. Sadly, I could still remember the demolished look on Minato's face when he saw that his whole life's work and the family he so eagerly wanted to have with his wife and son were destroyed within such a short time and reduced to nothing. Even if there was another child born that night, Minato wouldn't have asked any parent to sacrifice their child, or even a child born on that same night who became an orphan simultaneously after losing both his or her parents as a result of Kyuubi's attack into such a harsh burden, especially if he himself wasn't willing to do it with his own child. Therefore he used and sacrificed his own newly born child and his own life for the ritual to seal away the Kyuubi. It was a tragic and cruel burden that broke Yandame's heart, knowing that he lost everything he held dear all in one night, for the preservation of Konohagakure and preventing Kyuubi from doing more destruction and slaughtering than what it already had done. Tsunade started sobbing as more tears came down her face. Hearing this story made her hate the position of Hokage all the more since she lost loved ones who were in some ways connected with the title of Hokage. Hiruzen himself couldn't help but let a few of his own tears fall from his face while retelling the horrific event in detail. He wiped away the tears that fell upon Naruto's face before he continued. Before Minato went to battle the Kyuubi, he asked for one private moment alone with Naruto. I respected his wish, although I stayed close enough to the tent to hear what Yandame was saying. While alone with his son in the tent, Minato allowed some of his tears he held back to fall freely, while cradling Naruto in his arms, apologizing and telling Naruto that this wasn't what he wanted for him. I remember him telling Naruto that he wanted him to grow up in a village where he could have grown and matured into a great shinobi and inherit the village's will of fire with both himself and his mother and be loved by everyone in the village not only as his honorable son but also as Namake's Naruto. But Yondaime knew that wasn't to be because of the monster that attacked and ruined all of his dreams. Yondaime knew that he had to do something since it was both his duty as the Hokage and as a father to protect Konohagakure, to make sure his son had a future in the village he loved so much. Namake's Naruto, my son, you'll be the hero who defeated Kyuubi no Yoko and saved Konohagakure no Sato. Minato whispered to Naruto before calling me back to explain what he wanted me to do. Yondaime made it very clear that he didn't want the villagers to know of his son's existence. At least not yet. Originally, his intention was for Naruto to be regarded as the great hero who saved Konoha by sealing and imprisoning Kyuubi into him. The child's name was changed from Namake's Naruto to Uzumaki Naruto. He was giving his mother's maiden last name in order to protect his true identity and heritage. Although I wished there was another way to bring down Kyuubi, however, I knew that a severe price had to be paid to stop the creature. Naruto was to be made into a living sacrifice with his father giving up his life in order to save Konoha and all who live here. Tsunade didn't want to hear the story any further. Her heart was breaking. It was too tragic and horrible to bear. Before she could interject and tell her former sensei to stop telling her the story, Hiruzen added. However, the situation had taken an unexpected twist after the Kenjutsu was performed. Tsunade's head shot up upon hearing what her former sensei said. He continued, a very strong chakra made its way towards Naruto and infused itself into the boy's belly. However, this chakra wasn't red as we had anticipated. Rather, it was blue. No one knows what happened to Kyuubi after the Kenjutsu was initiated. But one thing is certain, Yondaime was sealed into Naruto. The Sanin's eyes widened in shock and absolute disbelief. She remained silent as her former sensei allowed her to process everything he told her up to now. A moment later, Sandaime went on. No one else outside the village council besides you and a few NBU who's been sworn to secrecy knows this. As far as the rest of the villagers know, Yondaime, his wife and child are dead, along with many others who lost their lives during the attack. Tsunade was left speechless at everything she was hearing. It was so overwhelming both mentally and emotionally. She didn't know how much more she could handle, and she knew that Hiruzen wasn't finished. As a result of this unexpected turn of events, the council and I realized that the situation concerning Naruto has drastically changed. With the boy having Minato sealed into his being, there's no doubt that he'll undergo certain physical and psychological changes in his development and acquire all, if not most, of everything that made Yondaime Hokage the man and shinobi he became known to be in Konoha and the rest of the shinobi world. You mean to say that Minato will take over his own son's body? Tsunade asked in disbelief. No, Hiruzen quickly replied reassuringly. Rather, Naruto will inherit and absorb his father's knowledge, wisdom, stamina, abilities, and chakra in a gradual process as he grows up, basically becoming a born Hokage. The child will still be his own individual person, not Yondaime incarnate. Because of this, Naruto is in more danger than before. It would have been hard enough should we have let everyone know that Minato had a surviving child, with countless people seeking to spoil, pamper, or adopt the young boy for their own intentions and possibly to get a hold on Naruto's huge inheritance. It's worse now with Yondaime sealed inside him, and if enemy villages and nations discover this secret, one of two worst-case scenarios could happen. One, they could either attempt to murder the child, or two, which is most likely, they'll try to kidnap the child and raise him to be part of their nation, thus corrupting the child and making him our enemy. Either scenarios would prove disastrous for Konoha and Naruto, and perhaps other villages and nations should they cross his path. Sandaime took a moment to look at Naruto, who was now fully awake and looking around the environment he wasn't so familiar with. Sighing, Sandaime continued, the truth is, I would have gladly took it upon myself to raise the child and guide his upbringing. However, my reinstatement as the Hokage heavily limits the amount of time I can spend with the boy, and I can't entrust him with just anyone in the village, not even with any of the clan leaders or village elders. And the last thing we need is Naruto turning out like Orochimaru. I don't want history to repeat itself with Naruto causing him to become something perhaps worse than Orochimaru himself. Tsunade remained silent. The memory and hurt of Orochimaru's betrayal was still fresh in her mind. Jiraiya isn't the raising little children type, and his role, as the author of those books you hate so passionately, wouldn't help in the child's development. For once I agree with you, Tsunade remarked. Although you're being a bit hypocritical since you also read those books like some closet perverts I know. Annoyed by her comment, Sarutobi cleared his throat and continued on with a more serious demeanor. The fact that I'm asking you to adopt and raise Yandame's son shows the amount of conviction and belief I have in your ability to raise, control and balance the child since he's been infused with a powerful Hokage. But still, Naruto is an innocent child who's been forced to shoulder this heavy burden without his consent. He needs someone who can properly raise and ensure his tutelage, and show him motherly affections on top of that. I'm more than certain you can also teach him in the advanced arts of medical and healing jutsus. Tsunade heard a lot more than she was bargaining for. It was too overwhelming for her at the moment. Sandaime knew that she already went through a lot in Konoha, and the fact that she lost most those she loved dearly, among them being her grandfather and granduncle, the Shodame and Nidaime, her lover and her little brother, both of whom wanted to become Hokage, left her with bitterness about her home village. After learning what became of Yandaime and his family, and the village as a whole, it was too much. And now she's being asked by her former sensei to adopt and raise Yandaime Hokage's child as her own. I need some time to think about this, Tsunade honestly admitted with a most calm demeanor with mixed emotions in her voice. Hiruzen didn't argue with her and replied understandably, I understand, Tsunade. Take as much time as you need. Tsunade reached out to Sarutobi, signaling to him that she wanted to hold the child. Complying, he handed Naruto over to her. She cradled the fully awakened child in her arms, who seemed to be looking at her in wonder. He yawned and closed his eyes for a moment before looking at her again. Only a week old and already you have to carry such heavy burden, Tsunade said softly to Naruto as a few tears slid down her face as he gurgled. Hiruzen smiled and watched the scene quietly. Mother and child. Seeing his former pupil smiling brightly down at what he hopes will be her soon-to-be adopted son, made Hiruzen suddenly overcome with an overwhelming sense of hope for the future. It was odd how, even in the aftermath of the bleakest days, he had found such a glowing sight. He didn't know what the future had in store for these two, but he was grateful that Tsunade was at least willing to consider adopting the child. Later that night, Tsunade was staying at a hotel for the night, at least one that wasn't demolished or damaged during Kyuubi's attack. She got little rest that night as she thought about everything that happened early that afternoon in Sandaime's office. She spent the rest of the day thinking about all that was explained to her in detail from her former sensei and what he was asking of her. In truth, she felt she didn't owe the village any favors, especially after all that she suffered and been through in the village. However, Naruto was a whole other story. He was an innocent child who's been overwhelmingly burdened with so much at a most tender and fragile age. He's only a week old, Tsunade thought to herself as she sat on her bed in her sleeping kimono. It was true that many other children of Konoha besides Naruto have been plagued with a great loss because of that bastard nine-tailed monster. However, Naruto was a very special case. In spite of what happened with all the other children who may have lost their parents, families and friends during the attack, they still had the opportunity to rebuild their lives from scratch and start life anew in the village with the help of their fellow villagers and Sandaime. Naruto, on the other hand, couldn't just go about like that, especially since he was infused with Yandaime Hokage. Two of her relatives were the first two Hokages who built Konohagakure no Sato, and they died young. Her little brother and lover Dan both wanted to become Hokage because of their intense love for the village and strong desire to protect it, and they both died young before they could live out their desires. Now she's being asked to adopt and raise a newborn child only a week old who'll inevitably grow and mature into a strong Hokage at an unknown young age. That is, if the child lives long enough for that to happen. Life is so cruel to me with its ironies, she thought to herself as she meditated on Naruto's present situation while fiddling with the necklace around her neck, the one that once belonged to her grandfather, Senju Hashirama, Shodame Hokage. Naruto most likely wouldn't get to live a normal life as a result of the changes he'll undergo. On top of that, all of his father's enemies will now become his enemies, and his father has made a lot of enemies before and after becoming Yondaime Hokage. In some ways, the child was going to become the new Yondaime Hokage, she figured, and it was unknown how Naruto was going to turn out since he would develop his own personality that will undoubtedly be influenced with some of his father's characteristics. Naruto is an innocent child who's been forced to shoulder this heavy burden without his consent. He needs someone who can properly raise and ensure his tutelage, and show him motherly affections on top of that. Those were Hizuzun's exact words to her. Tsunade wondered if she was even fit for the role as a mother sickney. She never had children of her own. Sure, she helped out midwives and nursing mothers with their children in the hospitals and observed how they nurtured their babies. But actually playing the role of nurturing a baby is a whole different story, she acknowledged, and she never nurtured children before. After the death of her lover Dan, before they had the chance to marry, she lost most of her interests and desires to get married and have children. And now she's being asked by Hiruzen to adopt and raise a child who's inescapably going to develop into a new Yondaime Hokage. Tsunade snapped out of her thoughts as she thought when she heard a knock come from the door. Turning to the door, she said, "Yes." "Tsunade-sensei," replied a young feminine voice from the other side of the door. "May I come in?" Sighing, Tsunade answered, "You can come in, Shizun." The young 15-year-old girl entered her sensei's room. Shinuz entered her sensei's room and went over to her. "Are you all right, Tsunade-sensei?" Shizun asked unconcerned. Tsunade looked at the young girl and said, "I'm fine. Why are you awake?" "I can ask the same of you," Shizun remarked. Tsunade said nothing as she looked away from the young girl. Seeing the expression on the older woman's face, Shizun asked, "Is there something on your mind?" "Beside what Sandaime told me," Tsunade remarked. "Not much." "What did he tell you?" Shizun inquired. "Do you want to talk about it?" Tsunade turned to face the young teen girl. After what felt like an eternity, Tsunade spoke with a serious tone. "Before I tell you, you must swear to never repeat what I'm going to tell you to anyone outside this room." Shizun felt the firmness of her sensei's voice and realized that what was on her mind was no laughing matter nor something to take lightly. Shizun answered sincerely, "I swear it. I give you my sincere word." After taking a breath, Tsunade began relating everything to Shizun in full detail about everything she was told from Hizun. Shizun listened intently as her sensei told her the story uninterrupted. What the young girl heard shocked her to no end, and there was more Tsunade had to tell her. Shizun already had tears falling down her face with some sobbing upon hearing the harsh and tragic account about Yondaime and his son Naruto. This heartbreaking revelation was beyond anything she was expecting to hear. Tsunade herself let a few tears fall down from her face before wiping them away. After Tsunade was done telling Shizun the full account regarding Yondaime and Naruto, she gave the young teen girl some time to absorb everything she was told. A few moments later, Shizun regained her composure as she wiped away the tears from her face. She turned to her sensei and asked, "So no one knows what happened to Kyubi no Kitsune?" Tsunade shook her head. "Not that anyone is complaining. However, it does raises some concern, at least to the Hokage and myself." "But, will you adopt baby Naruto?" "I have been thinking about that since I left the office," Tsunade admitted. "I haven't exactly decided on whether or not I should." "Why not?" Shizun asked. "It's not like you'll be handling him on your own. You'll have me here to help you take care of the child. Besides, I always wanted a baby brother. And who wouldn't want a little brother who's a Hokage?" Tsunade looked at her young apprentice with a blank expression. Upon realizing her words, Shizun immediately apologized. "Tsunade-sensei, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings and reopen old wounds. I mean, what I meant to say is—" "It's all right, Shizun," Tsunade assured, knowing fully well that the Shizun was referring to her late kid brother. "I know you weren't trying to offend me. You just got caught up in the moment, that's all. But still, adopting this particular child will be no walk in the park. Hell, adopting and raising any child is no walk in the park and will require a great deal of sacrifices to be made." Tsunade saw the irony with the word sacrifice. especially since Naruto was originally made into a living sacrifice to protect all of the future generations of Konoha and everyone else. Shizune. However, Tsunade continued, Naruto is not just any child who can be adopted and raised by just anyone. I'm amazed that Sarutobi-sensei went so far as to send one of his umbu to find me in order to ask me to raise the child as my own son. Sighed. I'm not even sure if I'm even mother material. Don't say such things, Tsunade-sensei, Shizune retorted with conviction. Sure, you're not perfect and have some bad habits, but hey, no one's perfect and we all have our share of problems. But I've been with you long enough to know that you'd make a terrific mother to that child, and so does Sandaime-sama. After all, he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to find you if he thought you were inadequate or unfit to raise Naruto or any other child for that matter. The Hokage chose you, Tsunade-sensei, out of all people, shinobi, clan leaders and village elders to raise this child who possesses untold potentials. Of course he could have chosen any other mother in the village to adopt Naruto. However, he saw something very special in you, Tsunade-sensei, that you might have not seen in yourself to move him to believe so strongly that you were fit to become Naruto's new mother. I strongly believe that you'd make a terrific mother to any child, blood-related or not. And I know your little brother and Uncle Dan would have felt the same way about you. Tsunade stood there in awe at Shizune. Her heartfelt words were filled with wisdom beyond her age. It amazed the older woman that her young apprentice could make her see and acknowledge something like this. Thank you, Shizune, Tsunade said appreciatively as she wiped away the new tears that fell from her eyes before smiling. I really needed to hear that, and those words coming from you really mean a lot to me. Shizune smiled, knowing that she managed to heal and restore her sensei's self-confidence. Unknown to the two women was that there was someone listening to the entire conversation from behind the door. The revelation about baby Naruto possessing Yondaime Hokage inside him and eventually acquiring Yondaime's attributes greatly intrigued the interloper. The possibilities with this new Yondaime Hokage are truly unique, the interloper thought before exiting quietly before being detected. Hours later that night, elsewhere, at an undisclosed location, Naruto was sleeping peacefully in a room guarded outside with two ANBU. No one without authorization from the Hokage himself was allowed into the room. 15 minutes later, the ANBU saw Sandaime making his way towards them. Sandaime-sama, the ANBU said as the two of them bowed in respects to the elderly Hokage, who nodded and greeted them. Is everything all right here? Inquired Sandaime. The first ANBU answered, Uzumaki Naruto is resting quietly, sir. No troubles have arisen, Sandaime-sama. That's good to hear, Sandaime replied. I will like to check up on the child now. The ANBU nodded and stepped to the side as Sandaime entered the room before closing the door behind him. Sandaime afterwards quietly walked over to Naruto's crib and looked down at the young boy, before forming a sinister smile on his face. A while later, the two ANBU waited outside the room for Sandaime to exit. As they waited, a voice from behind them asked, Is everything all right here? The two ANBU turned speedily in surprise to see Sandaime approaching them with two other ANBU following him to relieve their fellow ANBU from their watch. Sandaime-sama, the second ANBU exclaimed in confusion. Didn't you just enter inside the room a while ago? In seconds, Sarutobi registered what just happened as his eyes widened in horror and shock. What? Sandaime exclaimed before running to the door, finding it locked. Shit! Sandaime cursed before breaking the door down, storming into the room with the four umbu following. They came to see an empty crib and an opened window. Whoever came into the room had posed as him using a henge no jutsu and kidnapped Naruto. But the question was who and how did he or she find out about Naruto? This was exactly the situation that Sandaime feared would occur, and to his horror, it didn't take long for this secret to somehow get out. Turning to the four ANBU, Sandaime ordered with full authority. Lock the village down and station as many jounins and chunins at all exit ports to the village as you can. Gather all of the ANBU, and explain to them that Naruto has been kidnapped. Search the village. Search everywhere. I want Naruto found and the kidnapper brought in alive for questioning. We need to find out if he or she is working alone or with an accomplice. HAI. The four ANBU complied, disappearing in a puff of smoke. Turning to the empty crib, Sandaime thought, "This is exactly what I feared. Enemy forces coming against us during our weakest and most vulnerable moments right after a most catastrophic event. Yondaime, for your son's sake and the sake of the entire village, I hope Naruto will be found and brought back safely and fast." Meanwhile, Tsunade was finding it hard to sleep with all the commotion going on outside. She put the pillow over her head to try to drown out the noise, but it was to no avail. Frustrated, she got up and walked over to her bedroom door and opened it. Upon stepping out, though, she stepped on something with her bare foot. Looking door, she saw something that wasn't in the apartment before, which didn't belong to either her or Shizune. It was a notepaper that had names of clans and organizations written down on it. Someone was here, Tsunade realized. A moment later, Shizune ran into the apartment and went over to her sensei. "Tsunade-sensei," Shizune called out. Turning to the young girl, Tsunade asked, "What is it?" "All of the exit ports have been sealed off," Shizune explained. "The village is under complete lockdown by order of the Hokage. From what I've heard, there's been a kidnapping of some sort." It hit Tsunade like a ton of rocks as she looked at the notepaper in her hands. Clenching the paper tightly until it was crumbled in her fist angrily, Tsunade said, "Wait here." Not waiting for a reply, Tsunade stormed out of the apartment. "Tsunade-sensei," Shizune cried out, but her cries fell on deaf ears as Tsunade speedily ran out to pursue and apprehend the kidnapper. She didn't care about the fact that she was barefooted and still in her sleeping kimono. All that mattered to her was getting to and rescuing Naruto in time. From breaking an entry into her private lodging to kidnapping the newborn that was meant for her to adopt. For what it's worth, the culprit behind these crimes have just incurred her wrath. Chapter 5. A Maternal Shinobi. That night, the ANBU were dispatched to rescue and bring back Naruto by whatever means necessary. The villagers had no idea what was going on as the ANBU made thorough, all-out searches of everyone's homes, restaurants, shops, clubs, taverns, wherever they could think of. Among the ANBU on the search was a teenager named Hatake Kakashi, who lost his sensei and master, Yondaime Hokage, a week ago to Kyubi no Yoko. He was still affected by the event and loss of his master, although he tried not to show it. Kakashi already knew who Naruto truly was and why he was kidnapped. He wasted no time or energy in searching for the son of his master, determined to locate and return Naruto and protect him. Kakashi, with all of the ANBU, had to take an oath of secrecy not to reveal Naruto's true identity and heritage to anyone under severe penalty from the Hokage himself. The Jounin and Chunin in the meantime were under direct orders of the Hokage that no one was allowed in or out of Konoha until the search was over. It was no secret to anyone that something very big had happened, seeing that Sandaime Hokage ordered a massive lockdown and search of this magnitude. If anything, it was the last thing they needed, especially since Kyubi's attack was merely a week ago and practically no one healed from it. Meanwhile, a very beautiful woman with brown eyes, long blonde hair, and a most slender and nicely built figure and large breasts was running and leaping from roof to roof at top speed like a true athletic shinobi. Although it already dawned on her that she was barefooted and only in her sleeping kimono, which was flying with the wind and movements of her body, however, right now that was of little importance to her. All that mattered to her was getting to Naruto and fast. After seeing the names written down on that sheet of paper she found in her hotel apartment, to say that the kidnapper was up to no good was understatement. Taking a break on top one of the buildings to catch her breath momentarily, Tsunade scanned the area to see if there was anything that seemed out of place. So far, all she saw were the ANBU making searches of every building they were going into and the Jounin and Chunin remaining at their posts. The search for Naruto had gone for almost an hour and the kidnapper was still at large. She decided to head to where Naruto was last seen. Elsewhere, a few of the other ANBU were searching around the room Naruto was in earlier to see if the culprit left any clues behind that might provide a lead as to where he may have ran off to after kidnapping Naruto. Tsunade jumped down from one of the roofs of the building and gracefully landed down on the surface, running over to the small house that once housed Naruto. Stealthily, she searched around the outside section of the small house, searching for anything she could find that would serve as a lead from her. So far, she found nothing, which served to frustrate her. She knew that the kidnapper couldn't have gotten too far with all the ANBU in pursuit of him in an all-out manhunt. Her ears soon picked up on a conversation between two ANBU. They were conversing with each other on how the kidnapper used a henge no jutsu to deceive their two ANBU comrades into thinking he or she was Sandame. That was when it dawned on her that the kidnapper wouldn't have so foolishly attempt to make an all-out escape from the village so quickly with every ANBU after him or her. Most likely, he or she was hiding somewhere in the village. Leaving the scene, Tsunade went to search for anything that seemed out of place in the village. The ANBU were still searching everywhere with no success. It's been 3 hours and no one has seen either the criminal or the child anywhere. The Jounins reported that no one at the stations attempted to leave or enter the village. Sandame was growing frustrated as he was angry, but managed to maintain a calm demeanor. Tsunade decided to redo her search all over as she ran and leaped from roof to roof. As she was on the move, her eyes fell on a particular young ANBU whose name was Kakashi. She recalled whose student Kakashi was and his status among the ANBU. She was about to take off when something caught her attention. Some of the other ANBU approached him asking why he strayed from where he was assigned to search. He made a quick excuse before taking off to perform his job as the other ANBU went on their way. Tsunade decided to secretly follow Kakashi and see where he was going. As she continued following after Kakashi, she noticed how he was heading in the wrong direction, completely off course from where they said what was supposed to go. Something unprofessional of an ANBU who was supposed to know the routes of Konoha inside and out. Something was up, she realized as she continued secretly following after him. She soon noticed that he went into a small hut of some sort for a few moments and came out with what looked like a backpack filled with additional searching gear. Kakashi then took off towards the main exit port where he met up with two Jounins stationed at the port. Acknowledging his higher rank and explanation for him to begin his search on the outer skirts of the village, the two Jounins stepped aside as Kakashi hurried out from the exit port. Tsunade saw this and gave way to chase speedily before the Jounins noticed her presence and departure. A while later, the same two ANBU went to regroup with 4 other ANBU when they ran into a most familiar ANBU who was heading towards them with Sandame. Kakashi, as the first ANBU, "What are you doing here? Didn't we just meet up with you a while ago?" "What do you mean?" Kakashi asked. "I was with Sandame-sama for the last hour." That was when it dawned on Kakashi, Sandame, and the other ANBU. "Which direction did you see the other me ran to?" Kakashi asked as he, Sandame, and the other ANBU gave way to chase after the phony. It was clear that this kidnapper was a clever and elusive deceiver, whoever he or she was. Meanwhile, Kakashi was running through the forest with the backpack leaping from tree to tree at top speed. Tsunade was in hot pursuit of Kakashi, but kept a safe distance until she knew where he was going. As of now, they were a good distance from the village and Tsunade didn't like where this was going. Soon she saw him touch down into clear open field, but she kept herself hidden in the trees as she looked on. After making sure he was in the clear, Kakashi placed the backpack down on the grass and dispelled the henge that was around him. "Kai!" he said as the henge collapsed, revealing his true appearance. The man was geared in a standard Konoha Jounin uniform. He had brown hair and a Konoha forehead protector that had a slash across it. Clearly this shinobi is a missing nin of Konoha, Tsunade realized. This helps to explain how he was able to deceive and elude the ANBU, Jounin, and Chunin. He might even be a former ANBU himself. Tsunade soon saw that the henge on the backpack also dispelled, revealing none other than baby Naruto sleeping in a carrying baby basket with 2 straps to place over your shoulders. The missing nin looked over at Naruto and said, "Yandame Hokage, reduced to an inescapable captivity inside your own child. A fitting undoing for the likes of you. I'm sure I can get a hefty price from any village or clan who'd love to buy your child." "That's not going to happen," declared a feminine voice. Realizing he wasn't alone, the missing Nin looked around and shouted, "Who's there? Show yourself." As if on cue, Tsunade leaped from the tree she was on and landed down on the ground facing her enemy. Her beauty and current appearance, however, was anything but what the kidnapper was expecting. Seeing that she was barefooted and barely had anything on besides her sleeping kimono and what little fabric was underneath it with the wind blowing the kimono, the missing Nin fought hard to maintain his composure and not suffer from a massive nosebleed. Upon seeing her face, the kidnapper recognized who the blonde beauty was. "Senju Tsunade," he said, "one of the legendary Sanins. Didn't expect to find you out here on this night barely dressed. I didn't know you were that type of kunoichi." "Shut up," Tsunade retorted angrily. "You're the one who broke into my hotel room." "I did," he admitted. "Tell me though, how did you know I broke into your apartment?" "You left traces of your intrusion," she replied, showing him a crumbled piece of paper. "A list of clans, villages, and organizations." The missing Nin cursed under his breath and answered, "Originally, after I found out about you returning to Konoha, I was going to attack and kidnap you while you slept and sell your body to the highest bidder. However, after overhearing the conversation between you and that little girl concerning Yondaime and his son, I saw that kidnapping and selling the child instead would bring me more money than any Sanin's body could." "Bastard," Tsunade retorted as she got in her fighting stance. "You will not leave this land with the child." "Oh," replied the missing Nin, "and you intend to stop me, I presume. All right then, I'll take you out and sell both you and the child." Performing some hand seals, the missing Nin said, "Kara no Tsuyosa no Jutsu." Tsunade at that moment felt as though something was torn out of her as she fell to the ground on her knees and left hand while holding onto her chest with her right hand. She was breathing hard and felt unexplainably weak throughout her body. What did you do to me?" Tsunade growled as she forced herself up with the remaining strength she had left. Smiling sinisterly, the missing Nin relied, "I took away your super strength. I'd be a fool to think I could directly engage you in combat and think I would come out as the victor while you're in your prime. All I had to do was spike your tea earlier with an elixir of my own creation and wait for the elixir to saturate into your body. It also neutralizes your chakra, preventing you from performing ninjutsu and jinjutsu. Like I said earlier, my original intentions was to attack and kidnap you while you slept after I activated the poison." "Damn you," Tsunade cursed. "No matter, I'll protect Naruto. You want to get this fight started, or should I go first?" The missing Nin smirked at her, pulled out and placed on a claw gauntlet with long razor-sharp steel blades over his right hand. The missing Nin stated, "Since you insist on fighting." The missing Nin charged at Tsunade, thrusting his right hand at her. Tsunade dodged the attack swiftly as he continued slashing at her. After a couple of minutes, Tsunade soon took the initiative and went after him. Before the icing Nin took to flight, Tsunade struck him, sending him pummeling across the ground. "He ain't so tough," Tsunade thought confidently. The missing Nin got up off the ground and looked over at his opponent, seeing that she was in a ready-to-fight stance with her fists out ready to pummel him all over. Charging forward, the missing Nin yelled and rushed over to Tsunade, who was awaiting his arrival. Upon arriving, Tsunade jumped to the air and flipped behind the criminal shinobi. The missing Nin turned in time to see Tsunade punch him square in the face, knocking him down and away from her again. "Did you really thought you had a chance against a Sannin like me?" The missing Nin gave a sinister laugh as he stood back up again and said, "Well, if you want the answer that badly, I'm afraid that your only way to get it is to try to beat it out of me if you can. Have it your way." The Tsunade charged at missing Nin as he stood there waiting for her. Tsunade geared her fist out to strike the kidnapper. The missing Nin, however, stepped to the side as Tsunade's fist missed its target. The criminal shinobi jumped to the side as Tsunade turned to face him. She was clearly able to feel her remaining strength leaving her body as a result of the elixir absorbed into her body. Still, she had to fight on, not for her sake but for Naruto's. Resorting to taijutsu, Tsunade charged at the missing Nin, ready to throw her hurricane of punches and kicks. The missing Nin, however, dodged and evaded every last one of her attacks as she just kept coming. The female Sannin pressed on as she tried to land a blow on him, but he just was too fast for her, a result of the poison and jutsu he used on her. The kidnapper leaped from her, then dashed speedily past her before her eyes could catch sight of him. "What the?" "Here I am," shouted the missing Nin, charging like an uncontrollable bull. The missing Nin rushed at Tsunade and rammed right into her, thrusting her off the ground and flying some distance away till she collided straight into a tree, hard, with a solid thud. Tsunade struggled to get back up after feeling the brute impact from the last attack. Her body was in pain all over. Tsunade said weakly, What the hell was that?" It felt like I was punched by a summoning beast. The missing Nin was standing where he was looking at the female shinobi struggling to regain some of her strength. "What's the matter?" he taunted. "Did I slap you that badly?" Tsunade hissed at him. "Oh, you still have some fight left in you. I'll remedy that." Tsunade charged at him again. Punch after punch, kick after kick. Tsunade kept trying to land a blow on him, but she was unsuccessful as the jutsu is still depleting her stamina. Missing Nin blocked and evaded all her attacks. Pulling away, Tsunade took a moment to catch her breath as the missing Nin stood, where he was looking at her with a mocking expression. "Is that all you got?" he sneered. "If you're through catching your breath, I think it's now my turn to come for you." The missing Nin rushed at Tsunade and started his assault on her. Tsunade did all she could to block and evade as many of his attacks as she could. However, it was hard for her to keep up as a number of his punches and kicks found their way to strike her. Tsunade was now on the receiving end of all his swift and highly fast punches and slashes with his claw gauntlet as he just kept coming. She screamed every time from the tremendous pain and damages the steel claws inflicted on her. The missing Nin then delivered a round kick at her, sending her off the ground away from him. Tsunade stumbled and rolled on the ground, still she eventually stopped. She was now in more pain than she was earlier. Her slender and silky body was covered in dirt and dry mud, and she had multiple bruises and slashes around her face and body. She was bleeding all over, and her sleeping kimono was torn all over and stained in her blood. "It's a pity that I had to tear apart and desecrate such beauty," the missing Nin remarked. Tsunade, although in a great deal of pain, struggled to get back up to face her enemy. It was a while, but she managed to stand back up again. "Ready for more?" the missing Nin mocked. "You're dead," Tsunade snarled. "You first." With the remaining strength she had left, Tsunade ran to the missing Nin and started fighting with him again, trying to throw as many punches at him as she could. But to no avail, she was unable to hit him once as he kept dodging all her punches. The missing Nin then punched her away as she fell to the ground. He then yelled and dashed toward her with intent on hurting her more. Tsunade saw him leap and flip to the air before suddenly he cast his feet down in a landing position to land on top of her feet first. Seeing this, Tsunade quickly rolled away as he landed down on the ground, only to see him jump back up again and land on one of the tree branches. Finding where he was, Tsunade ran to one of the tree and ran up it to reach the same height as him. Afterwards, she pushed herself off the tree and threw herself towards him on the tree he was standing on with her fist out. The missing Nin was knocked off the tree and was sent falling straight down to the ground on his back as Tsunade landed where he was previously standing. Seeing where he was lying, Tsunade jumped off the branch with her feet in a land position to land on his chest. Missing Nin, however, saw this and curved his legs back and placed his feet up. Tsunade gasped when she saw this, but was unable to get away as she landed down on his feet. After making contact, the missing Nin thrust her away back high into the air. Tsunade flipped in the air as she now started to descend down from the air. The missing Nin flipped back up and saw Tsunade making her way toward him. Before she could land, he rushed and speedily jumped toward her and delivered a solid kick to her chest, sending her flying straight into a nearby tree that she crashed into before hitting the ground and lying there motionlessly. Seeing that she wasn't getting back up, the missing Nin took it that he came out the victor and said, "I must say, Tsunade, Taking you down even when you're weakened was no easy feat. No bitch like yourself has ever caused me so much trouble." Upon hearing that, Tsunade tapped into a newfound strength. If there was one thing Tsunade never took kindly to, it was being called a bitch. The missing nin turned and started off towards Naruto, failing to take notice of what was happening behind him. With a newfound strength, she stood back up, no longer feeling any pain through her already battered and cut-up body. The missing nin felt a very strong killer intent from behind him. He turned around and saw Tsunade standing there with a facial expression that sent a cold chill down his back. With eye-popping speed, Tsunade dashed to the missing nin and delivered a rock-hard punch to his face, sending him flying off the ground before beating on him with excessive brutality and speed. The missing nin had neither the time, strength, speed nor ability to evade this new and brutal attack, as he was being clobbered, punched, and kicked all over from head to toe at pure speed with devastating efficiency. Tsunade then jumped and thrust both of her feet straight into his chest, sending him flying fast off the ground into the air before crashing hard into a tree, forming a body-shaped dent into the tree. His body was heavily battered, and he also had a blood coming down his mouth. The missing nin had no strength left in him to move or fight anymore. During the assault, Tsunade, being an expert in human anatomy, inflicted severe damages to certain parts of his body, organs, and nervous system, making him completely vulnerable and defenseless to any attack. Tsunade slowly walked over to the battered kidnapper as he looked at her coming towards him. Reaching him, she looked down at him with a cold, unsympathetic expression on her face. Tsunade was able to see the expression of anger on his face, but she was able to see that his eyes reveal the actually truth to her. She saw the fear radiating through his eyes. He was very afraid, even though he was trying not to show it. He wanted to move and fight, but found himself incapable of doing anything. Tsunade soon heard Naruto wake up and begin crying for attention. Seeing that the kidnapper was no longer a threat, Tsunade went over to tend to Naruto's needs. Reaching the baby, Tsunade knelt down and picked up Naruto from the carrying backpack while keeping him wrapped in his blanket. Sitting down on the grass while leaning up against a tree nearby, Tsunade cradled and rocked Naruto in her arms, calming him down. Despite the fact that her body was going numb, she smiled brightly at Naruto as he gurgled. She moved closer to him and planted a soft kiss on his forehead. "My little Naruto," Tsunade said affectionately. "I risked my life to save and protect you, and I'll happily do it again for you, my little Naruto." Moments later, Sarutobi, Kakashi, and the ANBU arrived on the scene and saw a heavily battered and weakened Tsunade singing and cradling the now sleeping Naruto in her arms affectionately in spite of her horrid condition. Not too far away was the culprit lying motionless on the ground and in a great deal of pain. "Tsunade," Sandaime called out worriedly as he and the others ran over to her. She smiled brightly as her eyes grew heavier and heavier before being sent into a world of total darkness. Tsunade's eyes opened up to a new environment as bright lights hit her eyes. She strained a little before her eyes readjusted themselves to the environment. She found herself in patient's clothes and lying on a medical bed with bandages around some parts of her body and face. But the pain she had before was gone. There was a 4 needle inserted into her right arm with and a few wire attached to her upper chest area where her heart and lungs were monitoring her vitals. She realized that she was at Konoha Hospital. Looking around her room, she saw that it was nicely decorated and had bouquets of various flowers with Yamanaka florist shop's compliments. There were wrapped gifts, baby accessories, congratulation and get well cards seated on 2 tables. Sitting up, she then turned and found Naruto resting peacefully in a medical baby crib stationed next to her bed. She smiled bright upon seeing that Naruto was safe and without so much of a scratch on him. Several minutes later, the door opened revealing Shizune, Kakashi, in his ANBU gear and dog mask, and Sandaime entering the room before closing the door behind them. "Tsunade-sensei," Shizune said happily, "you're finally awake. I was so worried." "How long was I out?" Tsunade inquired. "Nearly 4 days," Sandaime answered. "That missing nin contaminated you with a massive overdose of chakra poisoning. If you were an ordinary woman, you'd have certainly died within mere minutes. But because you're one of the Sannin, the poison didn't kill you. Rather, it served to severely weaken and eventually paralyze you. You fell into a coma after the poison took full effects on you. Needless to say, I'm happy we found you when we did after your battle. The crippled and disabled missing Nin has been handed over to Ibiki for interrogations after we found that notepaper of his. Aside that, the doctors were able to fully heal you and completely remove the poison from out your body. Since then, you've made a full recovery and will be able to leave this hospital very soon. How did you explain the whole village lockdown and search incident? Tsunade asked. Smiling, Sandaime explained. I explained to everyone that your newborn son was kidnapped by a traitorous shinobi who was intending on selling away your child to one of our enemy villages, and that you went after the kidnapper yourself in spite the fact that the ANBU was on the job. If anything, kidnapping the son of one of the loyal legendary Sannin is an S-class crime. That explains all of the gifts and other valuables found here in my room, Tsunade acknowledged. Everyone believes Naruto to be my son. Officially, Sandaime interjected and smiled. He is your son. Senju Uzumaki Naruto is now his new official name. I already took care of all of the documentations and paperwork. You're officially his new mother. Tsunade smiled brightly on hearing that. Looking over at the still sleeping Naruto, she lifted him off his bed and cradled him in her arms affectionately. Looking at her, Sandaime said, You doubted whether you'd make a good mother to the child Tsunade. But after what Shizen explained to me and what I saw for myself after your battle with the kidnapper, I knew I made the best choice, sighed. It grieves me though to think that all this time I was so worried about enemies from the outside kidnapping Naruto when also I should have been worried about potential traitors from inside these village walls. And it nearly cost us greatly. We live and learn, Sarutobi-sensei, Tsunade remarked. We can't always predict what'll happen next. Kakashi removed his ANBU dog mask and went over to the Naruto who was still resting in Tsunade's arms. He looked at the child with interest and said, I'm still trying to accept the fact that my master is trapped inside his own child. The irony of the situation is rather unique. It's a shame I won't be able to take care of the born Hokage child myself. After all, Naruto is the son of my master, and as his father's former student Kakashi, Sandaime interjected, causing the ANBU to turn to him and stand at attention. We already discussed that you'll be too busy as an ANBU to raise and look after Naruto, and I made it very clear that the boy will need balance in his life. Kakashi. However, Sandaime continued, after what happened a few days ago, it's clear that the boy will be facing dangerous enemies from both in and outside these village walls, especially since that notepaper we found had names of a few of Yandaime's enemies. Personally, I'd hate to image what would happen if Yandaime's enemies were to get a hold of Naruto. Therefore, I would like for you to keep an eye on Naruto from time to time. Kakashi nodded wordlessly, willing to accept the task if that much. Sandaime returned his gaze back at Tsunade and said, Tsunade, since you'll be raising Naruto, I took care of the matter of where you, Shizune and Naruto will be residing at. You three will be living in a nice-sized two-story house not too far from the Hokage Tower. The Genins have already moved all of both your and Shizune's things there. How much is it going to cost me? Tsunade joked, although she was truly in debt to some people whom she owes money to. Some of debts resulted from her gambling habits. It won't cost you a thing, Sandaime assured. I bought the house and it's fully paid for. Everything else, though, will be on you, except the gifts, of course. Tsunade smiled and nodded wordlessly. Now with that taken care of, I'll be returning back to the Hokage Tower, Sandaime said. I'll assign some Genins here to take all of the gifts and accessories here and bring them over to your new house, Tsunade. Kakashi stand guard outside the room until the Genins arrive here. Tsunade will be leaving for her new home this afternoon. Kakashi nodded before putting his mask back on as both he and Sandaime exited the room, leaving both Shizune and Tsunade alone in the room with Naruto. The two women looked at the child who was now fully awake in Tsunade's arms. Life was going to be pretty interesting for Tsunade, Shizune, and Naruto. A month later, reconstruction of Kanehagakure no Sato was currently underway. Everyone was working together to rebuild the village and help whomever were in need of relief and comfort because of Kyubi's attack. Tsunade and Shizune were living in their new two-story house with Sandame's compliments. They couldn't live in the Namikaze manor for obvious reasons since Naruto wasn't of age to claim his inheritance. However, they were satisfied with what Sandame gave to them. It was a nicely sized house, comfortable enough for the three of them since they were going to be the only ones living there. Tsunade was provided with gifts and accessories any new mother would need in caring for a newborn. From diapers, water and milk bottles, a stroller, baby clothes, the works. She took it that this treatment was given to her because she was the legendary slug Sannin, but she sure as hell wasn't complaining, especially since she didn't have to pay it back much to her delight since she was already in a high debt rate. Over the month, both Tsunade and Shizune looked up various books on child psychology and parenting and applied whatever helpful advice they found. As challenging as being a mother was, Tsunade was growing fonder of the role than she ever expected, and Shizune could testify to that. A week later, that afternoon at the Senju residence, Shizune was walking towards Tsunade's bedroom with a bowl of warm water and a wash rag. Tsunade had intended on cleaning Naruto after he woke up from his nap. Reaching the door, she knocked on it and waited for a reply. "Yes," Tsunade asked from inside her room. "May I come in?" Shizune asked. "Need you ask?" Tsunade sighed. "Just come in. The door isn't locked." Complying, Shizune opened the door and proceeded into the room. "Tsunade-sensei, I got the bowl of warm water you asked dash." Shizune wasn't able to continue her statement when her eyes came upon a shocking sight. In front of her was Tsunade sitting on her futon Indian style with her sleeping kimono fully opened and hanging around her back and arms, exposing most of her slender body and white panties, leaving little to the imagination. Her long blonde hair was flowing freely down her bare back and shoulders. As for her injuries she had after her battle with the kidnapper, Tsunade's full recovery revealed not a single scar or blemish, much to her delight. Being cradled in her arms was Naruto, who to Shizune's surprise was sucking on Tsunade's left breast, while her bra was resting at the side on her futon. Shizune almost dropped the bowl of water had she not regained her composure from the shock. Tsunade-sensei," Shizune exclaimed. When did you started breastfeeding?" "I started 8 days ago." Tsunade smiled as she looked down to see Naruto continuing to draw milk from her breast. 8 days ago," Shizune repeated in surprise and shocked that she wasn't aware of this. "That's right," Tsunade confirmed. "I used a new highly advanced chakra-induced medical jutsu I created. It took me over 3 months to create and perfect it. I call it Uedo Togi no Jutsu. It's a new medical jutsu for women who wish to be infant nursing women, or wet nurses so to speak. I'm the first to use this prototype medical jutsu of my own creation, and as you can see, it turned out to be a real success. Maybe I'll teach this jutsu to you someday." Shizune blushed heavily upon hearing that as she watched the scene in amazement, as she noticed that Tsunade had a new glow to her, one she has never seen since Nawaki and Dan's deaths. Over the past couple of weeks, she noticed the gradual changes Tsunade's behavior was undergoing as she started being more attached to Naruto. Needless to say, the young girl was happy to see Tsunade breaking out of her hard and cold shell that would have completely overtook her had it not been for Sandame's sincere supplication to her to adopt Naruto. Basically, adopting Naruto was Tsunade's remedy for her cold demeanor and cooling down her lust for gambling, since she had to focus her time, strength, and money taking care of a child now. The two females were so engrossed with their circumstances that they failed to realize that someone had entered into their house uninvited. Upon walking in on them from outside the room, though, "H," cried the intruder, who was sent flying and crashing into the wall as a result of a massive nosebleed after seeing Tsunade's current manifestation and what she was doing. "What the hell?" Tsunade shouted after hearing the thud. The sound of the crash snapped both Tsunade and Shizune back to reality as they looked to see who their intruder was. Tsunade growled under her breath angrily upon seeing whom their guest was, who was twitching a little with blood coming from his nose and a very perverted smile on his face with drool coming from his mouth. "All of people," Tsunade said sourly as her right eye twitched several times. He had to show up unannounced. Jiraiya-sama, Shizune said a bit worriedly as she went over to the now unconscious hermit who was also in his late 30s. 15 minutes later, Jiraiya had regained consciousness and his composure long after Tsunade dressed herself in her regular clothes. She would have forced him to clean up the mess he made had Shizune not volunteered to do herself, saying that she didn't want to risk Naruto catching anything from Jiraiya. Tsunade was sitting at a table with Naruto fully awake and being cradled in her arms. Jiraiya was still across them with a most intrigued expression on his face. "So it's all true," Jiraiya said as he looked at his former teammate and the child she was mothering. "Sandaime-sama told me everything that has happened in regards to Kyuubi's attack after I came by earlier today. I had to see it for myself, and what I saw just moments ago went far beyond what my expectations were. The boy's living a genuine privilege not given to just anyone, and he's not even related to you." Tsunade frowned and snarled at Jiraiya, not missing the perverted meaning behind his statement, while Shizune looked at the older man in disgust. "Why are you here anyway?" Tsunade inquired. "And how did you manage to get inside my house when the door was locked?" "1. As a legendary shinobi I can pick locks," Jiraiya replied. "Also I received word that Konoha was attacked by the great nine-tailed fox demon and that my best and prized student lost his life stopping the monster." Jiraiya went on. "I hurried as fast as I could after hearing this and went straight to Sandaime who told me everything. I'm surprised he didn't request me to take Naruto under my wing seeing that I taught and trained the boy's father." "Although you did, however," Tsunade retorted. "You're not father material nor a good influence." "What?" Jiraiya shot back. "That's a load bullshit dash." Jiraiya cut himself short upon seeing what he was about to say. Shizune saw the look her sensei's face as she eyed Jiraiya with a look that said, "Watch your mouth or die." With a calm demeanor, Tsunade said, "I'm sure Sandaime-sama informed you of the balance Naruto needs in his life. Since Yondaime-sama was your best student, all of what you taught him will be gradually absorbed into Naruto. But until that time, he'll need to be protected." "That goes without say," Jiraiya agreed. "I'm aware of what happened between you and that missing Nin. I'll keep in mind not to come between a mother and her child." Tsunade smirked. Jiraiya at that point got serious. Though the boy will gradually absorb Yondaime's knowledge and his other attributes, however, he'll need someone to help him understand how to use and control it. Something like what Naruto will experience as he grows up could more than likely overwhelm and possibly drive him insane, which would be catastrophic for both himself and everyone else, and he'll need us to help him through it. An insane Yondaime would plunge Konoha into the ground. Since I taught the boy's father, it's only appropriate that I do likewise with his son and help where I can. Tsunade thought about what Jiraiya was telling her, and she found a measure of truth in his words. After contemplating on it, she replied, "I see where you're getting at. Something like what you say could happen if not prevent, and it could spell disaster. Nevertheless, I won't let that happen. I'll do whatever I must to protect my son, no matter the cost." Jiraiya was seeing how attached Tsunade was becoming to Naruto, especially after hearing the special emphasis she placed on the word, my. It wasn't too surprising seeing how attached she was to her kid brother Nawaki and lover Dan before they were killed. If anything, Jiraiya acknowledged, Tsunade was not about to lose Naruto for whatever reason. Ironies can be so cruel sometimes, Tsunade, Jiraiya thought. Just then, Tsunade smelled an unwelcoming odor coming from the bundle she was cradling. Sighing, she got up and prepared to change Naruto. Shizune got the sterilizing wipers and clean diapers, handing them over to Tsunade as she changed and cleaned Naruto. All the ninjutsu, genjutsu, kinjutsu, and medic jutsu in the world, Tsunade complained, and not one diaper change, no jutsu. Shizune and Jiraiya stifled on a laugh that partially leaked from their mouths upon hearing that. Tsunade finally finished change and clean her son. "All done," Tsunade said happily before telling Shizune to get Naruto's food to her. Complying, Shizune went and prepared Naruto food before returning. Looking over at Tsunade, Jiraiya asked, "You wouldn't mind if I hold little Naruto, would you?" Tsunade thought about it, and after a few seconds, she decided to grant her former teammate's request. Taking Naruto into his arms, Jiraiya held and looked at the young boy. Who'd have thought that my best prodigy would have ended up in this circumstance? Jiraiya thought. If the Akatsuki were to actually get a hold of Naruto, I can only image what horrors would become a reality if they were to mold him in their cruel likeness. Moments later, Shizen came back Naruto's food and set it down on the table. Tsunade took Naruto back from Jiraiya and began feeding Naruto herself. Jiraiya watched quietly as Tsunade tended to Naruto's needs with much affection. He recalled that the last time she was ever this affectionate was during the times Nawaki and Dan were still alive. It amazed Jiraiya that Naruto had such an impact on Tsunade's life, excluding the fact that he's the son of Yondaime Hokage. Getting up off his seat, Jiraiya said, "Well now, I must be on my way now. I'm late for my new research I have to do." Tsunade knew all too well what Jiraiya had in mind as she shot him an annoyed look. Jiraiya grinned before going over and leaning down at Naruto. "I'll be seeing you soon, Neo Yondaime Hokage." Tsunade and Shizen blinked upon hearing the nickname Jiraiya just gave Naruto. "Just get out," Tsunade replied as Jiraiya smirked and went on his way, closing the door behind him. "Neo Yondaime Hokage," Shizen repeated. "Jiraiya Baka," Tsunade interjected. "I'm going to have to keep an eye on him. I'd hate to have my son adopt his perverted bad habits." "Bad habits?" Shizen mumbled under her breath mockingly. "This coming from someone who gambles chronically? I'd hate for my little brother to adopt your gambling habits." "What was that?" Tsunade said with a touch of venom in her voice. Shizen paled and replied sheepishly, "Oh, nothing, Tsunade-sensei. What do you know? It's time for my medical training." Shizen ran out of Tsunade's presence before anything else was said between them. The slug Sannin was now alone with her boy. Sighing to herself, she said, "Why do I put up with them?" Naruto started gurgling as she smiled and turned her attention to him. "What's that?" Tsunade said playfully to Naruto. "Because I have to? That's your decree as Lord Hokage?" Giving a motherly laugh. "You're no Lord Hokage in this house. You're my little Naruchan and you're going to learn medic jutsu and how to be a medic nin. Yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are." Naruto smiled back at her with his toothless smile almost as if he understood her words, causing Tsunade to smile even brighter. Unknown to Tsunade was that the entire scene was being watched by Sandaime, who was looking upon them from his specially crystal ball. Needless to say, he was very happy for both Naruto and Tsunade. That night, many in Konoha were all fast asleep save for Konoha Police and the ANBU. Meanwhile, at the Senju residence, Tsunade was sleeping peacefully in her room. All was serene when Naruto started crying in his crib. Tsunade woke up to this and got up off her futon. Going over to Naruto, Tsunade picked him up and held him, resting his head on her shoulders while gently rocking him in her arms. Naruto soon calmed down and quieted much to Tsunade's delight. After another minute, Tsunade said thoughtfully, "I bet you're hungry, my little Naruchan." Tsunade sat down on her futon with Naruto and prepared to breastfeed him. Just as she is about to open her kimono, however, the door to her room opened, revealing Shizen cradling something in her arms. "I'm sorry, Tsunade-sensei," Shizen said. "I came earlier to change Naruto's diaper and bring him back. I didn't want to wake you." Tsunade saw that Shizen was cradling a fully awake Naruto in her arms. The slug Sannin saw that something was definitely wrong with this scene. "Wait a minute," Tsunade exclaimed. "If that child is Naruto, then who am I dash?" Looking down at her arms, Tsunade saw that she was cradling a wooden log in her arms. While cradling the log, she turned and saw Naruto, quietly attempting to crawl and sneak away from her towards the opened window. As Naruto was making his way towards the window, he then felt an extreme bloodlust approaching and coming from behind him. As he fearfully and slowly turned his head, he thought of one word that he thought might have saved him with puppy eyes as he sucked his right thumb. "Mama!" Outside the house, Sandaime Hokage was taking a late-night stroll around the village when suddenly, "Ba-am!" Sandame turned to see a small figure coming flying from out of Tsunade's bedroom window. The figure was sent flying high into the skies across the village. "There they go again," Sandame said sympathetically, knowing all too well who that figure was. "He'll never learn." On the other side of town, the same small figure came crashing hard into the ground, forming a crater in it. The figure transformed back into his real self and was in much pain. He was heavily bruised all over. "Oh," Jiraiya mourned. "So close, damn that Shizune. I was just a few seconds from paradise. And I was really looking forward to having some of that good stuff she treats Naruto to." Jiraiya slowly picked himself from out of the crater before checking himself for whatever additional damages was done to him as a result from the impact to the ground. In any case, he was in a whole world of pain. Meanwhile, a very pissed-off Tsunade was in her bedroom standing with a broken log in her right hand looking out through the window while Shizune was looking on with a pale and frightened expression. She threw the log pieces out of the window before calming down. "Perverted excuse for a life form," Tsunade stated. "So much for his word about not coming between a mother and her son. I just might kill him if he pulls that stunt again." Turning to Shizune, Tsunade walked over to her and took Naruto from her. "Thank you, Shizune," Tsunade thanked. "I'll take it from here." Shizune nodded before quickly exiting the room and closing the door behind her. Tsunade then went over to her futon and sat down on it with Naruto in her arms. Opening her kimono, Tsunade began breastfeeding Naruto, who accepted her nourishment with adoring want. "My, you were certainly hungry, weren't my little Naruto-chan?" Tsunade smiled affectionately while caressing Naruto's soft blonde hair. After a couple of more minutes, Naruto was done drinking her milk before Tsunade closed her kimono and stood back up, rocking and singing him to sleep. /n. "I'm feeling lazy about writing a song of any sort. Therefore, think up of any bedtime songs you know of that a mother would sing to her newborn." After another 12 minutes, Naruto fell fast to sleep in her arms. Going back to her futon, Tsunade laid Naruto down gently on it before lying down next to him and pulling the covers over them. "Good night, my little Naruto-chan." Tsunade, as before, she gave him a gentle kiss on his forehead and going to sleep herself with Naruto cuddled close to her. 8 years later. Over the course of 8 years, Naruto, age 8, grew up being raised by Tsunade, age 46, and Shizune, age 23. With Jiraiya, age 46, staying around occasionally to guide Naruto's mental development as he gradually absorbed Yandame's mental and physical attributes. When it came down to it, what more did one really need? Many things happened during the course of time. Tsunade and Shizune were both medic nins, obviously therefore, Naruto ended up having a fairly advanced vocabulary for his age complement with what he was getting from his incarcerated father Yandame Hokage. Naruto, however, wasn't aware of the fact that Yandame was sealed inside of him. Around the time Naruto was about to turn 5, Tsunade stopped breastfeeding Naruto. It surprised Shizune and even Jiraiya and Sandame that Tsunade had been breastfeeding Naruto for nearly 5 years with the use of her Uedo Togi no Jutsu. And speaking of this jutsu, Tsunade taught it to selected female medic nins of Konoha who sought become infant nursing nins. To say that this new medical jutsu was a mere success would be an understatement, as many of females medic nins from other villages travel to Konoha to learn this new medical jutsu, along with whatever other new medic jutsu they could learn. Tsunade didn't miss the opportunity to charge for the training, which surprisingly wasn't refused since she originated the jutsu. Tsunade's new jutsu and several others she was willing to teach made quite an impact in the medical practice, which helped boost her reputation highly in the medical fields. With the money she was making, though, Shizune had to be on her back constantly in order to prevent Tsunade from gambling it all away and pay off the debts she owes. Growing up with a family, one's parents naturally pass on what skills they have to their children. A father will gladly teach his children how to play a sport or practice a trade. A mother will teach her children, whether they like it or not, social etiquette and how to deal with people and so on. Now, when you're growing up with a mother and sister who contributed a great deal toward modern medic nin theory, you pick up some things. Of course, it wasn't until shortly after Naruto's 4th birthday that he actually started to actively follow in his mother's footsteps in the medic field, much to Tsunade's joy. Sandaime didn't mind Naruto learning to be a medic nin. This was in contrast with the time when he was younger, when he turned down the idea Tsunade suggested in training shinobis to be medic nins years ago. His reasons at the time were because during that time Konoha was at war and had little time and resources available to even begin starting up medical training course for shinobis. But now times have changed and things are different now. If she wasn't teaching medic nins, healing, performing surgery, or gambling, Tsunade spent large measures of her time with Naruto and teaching him, whether it was in the arts of medicines, jutsu, or combat, although she was a bit of a slave driver when it came down to learning healing and medic jutsus. Even that was a bit of an understatement. It was perfectly clear to everyone how attached and very protective the slug Sannin was with Naruto. For any mother who cared deeply for their children, it was truly understandable. On occasions, Tsunade took long-distance travels from Konoha and journeyed to other villages. Whether it was for medical businesses or gambling fun, Naruto was taken wherever she went, and Shizune followed, of course. Shizune and Naruto became very close as she became a big sister figure to him, thus being called Shizune-nichin by Naruto. To Shizune's dismay, though, Naruto did pick up some of Tsunade's habits on gambling. However, to Tsunade's annoyance though, Naruto was actually a little better than her and even won a few games to Shizune's surprise. Sandaime became like a grandfather to Naruto, although he's rather annoyed at the fact that Naruto constantly refers to him as either old man or old geezer, something he suspects the boy picked up from Tsunade. Once in a while, Sarutobi would pay Jiraiya some visits during his training session with Naruto. From what Sandaime was seeing, Naruto was making impressive progress. The aged Hokage knew of the nickname Jiraiya gave Naruto and found it fitting in some respects, although Jiraiya would call Naruto Neo Yondaime Hokage in a surprisingly mocking way, since Naruto started calling him Eroji-san, perverted uncle. In spite of this, Jiraiya did become an uncle figure to Naruto, a perverted uncle nonetheless though. Although he helped in training Naruto in how to control some of what he already acquired from Yondaime without his knowing of it yet, however, Naruto grew annoyed at the number of times Jiraiya would get distracted for periods of time in looking at pretty girls and women when he was supposed to be training him instead. One day, during Naruto's training with Jiraiya, Naruto's frustration in Jiraiya repeatedly paying little attention to him and watching a bunch of 18-year-old girls in bikinis play together in a water stream boiled to the point that Naruto ran and punched him so hard with all his strength that Jiraiya literally was sent flying high in the sky before crashing down into the stream where the girls were. Needless to say, the girls welcomed the pervert with anything but opened arms as they inflicted additional injuries on him as he cried for help. Tsunade laughed her ass off in tears when she found out about the incident. Evidently, Tsunade's temper also rubbed off on Naruto. However, it shocked and amazed her, Shizune, Kakashi, Sandaime, and Jiraiya, who was on the receiving end of Naruto's fist, that Naruto had also acquired a large portion of Tsunade's raw super strength. Tsunade's research revealed that her almost 5-year practice and use of her Uedo Togi no Jutsu, wet nursing technique, with Naruto resulted in Naruto being permanently infused with her strength since her milk was induced with her chakra. However, it seemed that he was only able to tap into that raw strength in large quantities during a mental or emotional episode of some sort. So even though the strength was there, however, he still doesn't fully know how to perfectly tap into the whole thing and use it at will. Even still, he managed to maintain being able to have some of that dormant strength. Kakashi, age 22, without being reminded, kept tabs on Naruto from time to time, almost as though he was a protective big brother. On occasions, he'd stop by and visit Naruto. And speaking of playing the role of the older brother, Naruto started referring to Kakashi as Kakashi-nizan. And like many siblings, the younger one usually looks up to the older sibling as a role model. This, however, wasn't without some consequences. Naruto started imitating Kakashi in the use of wearing a ninja mask like he does, which he started after turning 6 years old. Also, Kakashi would sometimes spoil Naruto when they hanged out together, and sometimes he'd spar with Naruto also. Kakashi was also known for being a major fan, like so many, of Ika Ika Paradise, a famously known graphic adult series written by Jiraiya the Toad Sannin himself. One day, Naruto managed to get a hold of one of Kakashi's latest and rare edition books and read through it. What he saw and read shocked and at the same time fascinated him to the point that he had to find out what more. The detailed erotic and sexual images Naruto was studying only served to capture more of his attention. What he learned from that one book inspired him to create a new form of jutsu, one he'd use on perverts like Jiraiya or any other shinobi who'd fall victim to a most sexually arousing and erotic sight. The irony was indescribable. After Kakashi realized that his new book was missing, he frantically searched all other for it for 2 days, until he found it with Naruto, who was reading the book for a third time. Naruto apologized but explained that after seeing him read those books so many times, it sparked his curiosity to see what was so interesting about it. So he took his new one the moment he saw that his guard was down and read the whole book through. Rather than being angry, Kakashi was impressed by the boy's ability to outwit him. But then again, Naruto was infused with his master who taught him the ways of the shinobi. Naruto wanted to use and test out his new jutsu on Kakashi, but decided against it since Kakashi wasn't mad at him. He called his new jutsu Oiroke no Jutsu. While growing up, Naruto became a major addict for ramen. It was no surprise to Jiraiya that Naruto would unknowingly be like his father, who, like him, was a ramen addict. Tsunade had to be on his back about eating healthy foods, fruits and vegetables, and not an excessive amount of starch and carbohydrates. Although Naruto did eat the other healthy foods as Tsunade told him to, however, he would retort back to his mother about her unquenched love for sake, resulting in both them hitting occasional stalemates. A month later, Tsunade was sleeping on her futon in her bedroom that night when a small figure entered her room. The figure made his way toward her when Tsunade turned and opened her eyes to the young boy stopping where he was and standing in front of her. "Naruto-chan," Tsunade said. "Why are you awake? Shouldn't you be in bed sleeping?" Nervously, while holding his right arm that seemed to be hurting for some unknown reason, he answered, "Ka-chan, I had a very bad dream. Can I sleep here with you?" It didn't take a scientist to see that Naruto was very frightened about whatever nightmare he had. Instead of asking about what his nightmare was, she simply grabbed and raised her blanket, granting Naruto access to sleep on her futon with her. Happily, Naruto hurried and climbed in, hugging Tsunade as though she was his only sanctuary and source of protection. She threw the blanket over them and embraced her son as he fell asleep next to her. 3 weeks later, Naruto's nightmares have been occurring on a weekly basis. A few times he woke up screaming in terror and fear, waking Tsunade and Shizen, who'd run into his room to check on Naruto. On a few of these occasions when those same nightmares occurred, they noticed that his right arm reddened a bit. They didn't know what to make of it. They ran some examinations on his arm to see if they could find anything. To their frustration, they found very little that could help with Naruto's condition. When asked about what he sees in his nightmares, Naruto told them that he saw a giant red furry monster, viciously killing and destroying everyone and everything in its path with all its fury. He added that the monster was called Kyubi no Yoko. Hearing this story sent a cold chill down Tsunade and Shizen's backs. They couldn't understand why Naruto started having realistic nightmares about the nine-tailed fox and why his right arm would turn red when those nightmares occurred. Thus far, he had 9 nightmares of Kyubi. A week later, Naruto was in Sandame's office that morning after Tsunade and Shizen went to work at the hospital. The present Hokage had called Naruto in, wishing to discuss something with him. Naruto was now standing in front of Sandame with his now long blonde hair that reached down his back in a braided ponytail, with some spiked hairs resting over his forehead. Tsunade evidently allowed the boy to let his hair grow over the years. Naruto was also wearing a blackish-blue ninja mask like the one Kakashi wears, and also blackish-blue pants and shirt with black sandals and white bandage-like wrappings going about his legs from within the bottle of his pant to inside his sandals. He also wore fingerless black gloves and a gray robe-like vest similar to the one Tsunade wears with a dark blue sash tied around his waist. Sandame saw how Naruto was taking after Kakashi outwardly, and he also knew that Naruto was taking after Yandame in others ways the boy wasn't aware of as of yet. "Okay, Jizan," Naruto said. "What am I here for?" Sandame frowned at the name he was called again. He practically lost count on the number of times Naruto called him that. You're here to be informed that you'll be starting attendance at the Konoha Academy starting tomorrow. Naruto's face looked like it fell off upon hearing those words. What? Naruto exclaimed in disbelief. Have you gone senile? Sandaime was tempted to bop Naruto on the head for that remark but remained calm as he took another puff from his pipe. No, I'm perfectly fine. Thank you. Seriously, however, it's a mandatory procedure for all children in Konoha, you included. It's essential that you go through the 4-year procedures of attending and graduating from the academy to become a genin and climb the shinobi ranks from there. For years, Naruto argued in outrage. You can't be serious. I'm at a much advanced level than those newbies. On top of that, I'm training with 2 Sanins, being raised by one of them who happens to be my mother. And once in a while Kakashi Nezen spars with me, and he's an ANBU captain. Sandaime couldn't deny the truths Naruto was telling him, especially since he witnessed how Naruto have been developing over the years. Indeed, Naruto was stronger, faster, and smarter than normal. If anything, Naruto was most likely at Jounin level now, but his development to Kage level was still in progress and had several more years to go. However, Sandaime couldn't risk compromising Konoha's education protocols because of Naruto's special circumstances. He had to protect Naruto's secret, although Naruto himself wasn't aware of it, ironically. You want me to join the academy? Fine, Naruto retorted. But since my skills and knowledge are at a higher level, at least allow me to be part of this year's graduating class. You and I both know that's not a possibility, Sandaime replied. Something like that would raise one too many questions, and many would think that I'm showing unfair favoritism, especially since your mother happens to be Tsunade, and your trainer is Jiraiya, both of whom happens to be my former students. I'm sorry, Naruto, but you're going to have to earn your shinobi ranks like everyone else. Took another puff from his pipe. If anything, Naruto, the 4-year experience might serve to humble you. Sandaime's sense of logic, which was completed with his last statement, infuriated the 8-year-old Naruto. The aged Hokage saw Naruto's indignation and displeasure at what was handed down to him. That's it, old man, Naruto exclaimed as he stood before Sandaime defiantly. You asked for it? I didn't want to do this, but you left me with no other option. Sandaime took it as though Naruto had threatened him. Before the Hokage could say or doing anything to reprimand him, Naruto formed a seal and said, Oiroku no Jutsu. There was poof of white smoke from Naruto, and when the smoke cleared, what Sandaime saw was a very beautiful naked 19-year-old girl with a most ideal feminine figure. Large breasts like Tsunade's and long blonde hair that went down her back, reaching her backside, with some strands of hair cover her lovely face. She was completely soaked and wet all over, with water dripping down her slender body and hair with the light reflecting off her body, adding luster to her appearance. She possessed an alluring smile that showed that she didn't mind being seen the way she was. Her left arm was over her breasts while her right hand was over her haired crotch. There was some steam around the girl's body, but it was light enough for Sarutobi to see her in all her lustrous nude glory. Please, Sandaime-sama, the female asked with a most sensual and erotic feminine tone before licking and sucking her left index finger. May I please join this year's graduating class? I promise to make it a decision you'll never regret. Sandaime screamed before falling off his seat and crashing down to the floor, twitching and falling unconscious from a heavy blood loss. Naruto reverted back and looked on in shock after seeing what just happened, before bursting into a fit of laughter. He couldn't believe that Sandaime Hokage, the proclaimed professor of jutsu, easily fell victim to a jutsu created by an 8-year-old. Sandaime regained consciousness in time to see Naruto laughing hysterically at his dilemma. He grabbed some napkins and cleaned the blood off his face and floor. When that was done, he placed his pipe back in his mouth and slowly walked over to Naruto, who had then eventually calmed his laughter down. How did you like that, old man? Naruto asked proudly with a large grin on his masked face. That was my Oiroku no Jutsu, which I personally created a month ago after reading one of Kakashi Nezen's new Aika Paradise books he likes reading so much. I had no idea my new jutsu would work this good, since it effortlessly knocked you out. I see. I must say that new jutsu of yours is most impressive, Very effective and highly original, Sandaime complimented before he smacked Naruto hard across the back of his head. Don't do it again. Naruto grimaced while rubbing his head, although he was still feeling the stinging effect from the smack. Damn, I didn't think he could hit so hard at his age, Naruto thought before grinning. At least I know his weakness. He's just like Eroji-san. What are you smiling about? Sandaime inquired, not liking the look on Naruto's face. Nothing important, Naruto lied before changing the subject. If it's that important that I have to attend the academy, then I'll attend it. Sandaime smiled on hearing that. That's good, Naruto. Your instructor will be Umino Irika, and you'll report to him tomorrow morning with your new classmates. And one other thing, Naruto. Yeah, old man. What transpired here in this office with regards to that jutsu you used against me will remain in this office, Sandaime decreed seriously. You are to never discuss that incident with anyone. Are we clear? What? Naruto whined. Why can't I? Disobey me and I'll pass a law through the entire village and neighboring smaller villages that are extensions of Konoha, forbidding anyone from feeding, selling, or making ramen of any sort for you again, ever. Hearing those words sent a very cold chill down Naruto's back as his face paled. Life with no ramen. Naruto mentally mourned in horror. Forbidden from ever eating ramen again. That's just cruel and inhuman. Naruto knew not to take Sandaime's warning lightly as his shoulders slumped down. Sandaime smiled, satisfied with himself, knowing fully well how addicted Naruto was to ramen, just like Minato was. Fine, you win, Jizan, Naruto conceded. I won't go telling anyone how you were knocked out from my Oiroke no Jutsu. It's not worth forever giving up my privilege for eating ramen. I'm glad that you see it my way, Sandaime retorted. All preparations for you being placed in Irika's class have already been taken care of, Naruto, but there's no need to be upset about the thought of going to the academy. All in all, I'm certain you'll make some new friends there, I'm sure. And a good shinobi knows when and how to make good friends who ultimately make great allies. Therefore, more is involved in going to the academy than just learning the ways of the ninja and the history of our nation. Give it a chance, I'm sure you'll enjoy your experience. With that said, you can hurry to Jiraiya. I'm sure he's waiting for you. Naruto started on his way when… Naruto. The boy turned to Sandaime, who now had a look of concern on his face. Sandaime continued, I heard from your mother that you've been having bad nightmares. Is everything all right now? I'm fine, Naruto assured. I haven't had one for a week now, so I'm okay. That's good to hear. We wouldn't want anything bad to happen to you. Sandaime smiled. Seriously? We don't need anything bad happening to you. Well, I better go now. See ya. Naruto. The young boy turned again in time to see a small pouch thrown at him. He caught the pouch to find that it had some money in it. Don't you treat yourself to some ramen later today? Sandaime smiled. With a bright smile of his own, Naruto ran toward the door. Thanks, Jizan. Naruto yelled happily as he ran out of the office and hurried on his way to Jiraiya. Going back to his desk, Sandaime sighed, beaten by hentai jutsu created by an 8-year-old brat. Had I not placed that restriction on that boy not to go bragging about how I fell for that absurd jutsu of his, the repercussions on my reputation as the Hokage would have been most undesirable. I'd be the laughingstock of the entire village. Pulled his Hokage hat down partially. Maybe I ought to label that absurd hentai jutsu of his as a kinjutsu, forbidden jutsu. The following day, Tsunade dropped off Naruto to school before heading to work. After kissing him on the cheek, she let him enter the building where the other children were heading while being instructed by the Chunins there where their classes were. Not surprisingly, Naruto still wore that same ninja mask on his face along with his same clothes as before. It wasn't long till he found the assigned class he was supposed to go to. He entered the class to see a man in a standard Chunin uniform with a scar across his face and a small black ponytail. The room was already filled with students save for Naruto, who just entered and closed the door. Naruto saw how all eyes were now on him as he walked over to the man he figured was the teacher. You're Irika-sensei, Naruto assumed. Irika, age 22, replied. Yes, I am. And who might you be? I'm Senju Uzumaki Naruto, son of Tsunade. Wait a minute, asked a girl with pink hair and green eyes. You're Senju Tsunade-sama's son? Yes, I am, Naruto confirmed. You're the son of the legendary slug Sannin. A girl with blonde hair and blue eyes asked excitedly. Yes, Naruto replied a bit dryly. As Naruto looked around, he saw the body of students were whispering to each other, possibly about him, he figured. He knew how famous Tsunade was by many both within and outside the walls of Konoha, and the fact that he's her son also spread his reputation as well. He also knew that Tsunade sucked at gambling. All right, Naruto, you can take a seat up there by next to Hinata, Irika instructed. Naruto turned and saw a young girl with short indigo hair and pale eyes sitting by an empty desk and fumbling with her index fingers while looking at him shyly. Shrugging, he went up the steps leading to his assigned desk and sat by the girl. He turned to her before she looked down at him with a small blush on her face. You're Hinata? Naruto inquired. She nodded. Why, yes, I am.
I'm Hyuga Hinata.
You're from that Hyuga clan, Naruto said. That's cool. I heard a lot of interesting things about you guys and that really cool bloodline limit you guys have. Hinata smiled and blushed again from Naruto's compliment. Before a conversation could start, Irika started speaking, thus beginning the first day of class. As the class went on, Naruto, in pure boredom from hearing things he already knew, laid his head on the desk and drifted off to sleep. Hinata giggled a little from Naruto's antics. 6 months later. During his early days in the academy, many of Naruto's peers, girls in particular, asked him a bunch of questions about his personal life with Tsunade and what cool jutsu he knows. After Yamanaka Ino and Hinata's fathers, Inoichi and Hayashi, both of whom are part of the village council, learned that Naruto was in their class, both of their fathers encouraged their daughters to associate more with Naruto, both fathers knowing fully well that aside the fact that not only is he the adopted son of Tsunade but also the son and sole heir of Yondaime Hokage whose seal inside him. Ino had little, if any, trouble complying with that, which was more than what could be said of Hinata, who was a bit too shy to be as open with him as Ino was, as were several other girls. Not that Naruto didn't like the attention, however, it was starting to annoy him. During the end of the second month, Naruto, out of boredom and frustration, started pulling pranks on whomever he saw could give him a good adrenaline rush. His first target was none other than Irika, who was given a nice-size apple by Naruto after walking into class. Irika thought it was highly thoughtful of Naruto while others thought he was being a kiss-ass. Those thoughts, however, were instantly changed after a seal of some sort appeared on the apple, causing the apple to explode in Irika's face with a small batch of red paint thrown to his face, and a sticker tag thrown and instantly fastened to his forehead from the exploding apple that stated, "Watch what you eat. A true shinobi is never too trusting." "How did you like them apples, Irika-sensei?" was what Naruto said before he and the entire class burst into a fit of laughter, which only added to Irika's fury towards Naruto's prank, who was made clear when Irika started yelling and berating him for the stunt he just pulled. Naruto told him that if he truly intended to kill him, then he'd already be dead from having needles burst into his face instead of the red paint and sticker tag on his face. The thought that Naruto's prank turned a Chunin into a live-action joke and lesson within seconds had the class look at Naruto in astonishment. Since then, Naruto started pulling several other pranks on unsuspecting Chunins and Jounins, and once in a blue moon a few ANBU. This led to Naruto being occasionally chased around the village by the Chunins and Jounins he'd pull his pranks on. This, in effect, gave the villagers some good laughs that were well needed. The idea of seeing the son of the slug Sannin pulling childish yet cleverly planned pranks on Chunin, Jounin and ANBU-level shinobis and finding ways to evade being caught by them much to their irritation was quite comical. Of course, his pranks didn't go unnoticed by Kakashi, Shizune, Jiraiya, Tsunade, or Sandaime. The Hokage himself was given some good laughs from watching some of Naruto's pranks on the Chunins and Jounins, happy that he wasn't on the receiving end of those well-devised pranks. For Kakashi, Shizune, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Sandaime, not only was the very thought of an 8-year-old Yondaime, namely Naruto, pulling off those well-thought-out pranks on unsuspecting shinobis quite comical, but it also reinforced the fact that Yondaime Hokage was indeed an excellent strategist during his younger days before becoming a Hokage. Though none of his pranks actually hurt anyone, it only served to make Naruto look like a mischievous troublemaker among the Chunins and Jounins. When confronted by the victimized shinobis in front of Tsunade and Sandaime about his pranks, he told them that it was all in good harmless fun. It annoyed the Chunins and Jounins to hear Naruto's childish sense of logic. However, there was more to Naruto's pulling his pranks than he let on. In spite of all this thought, it amazed many to see how smart, strong and fast Naruto was for his age with the stamina he possessed, which unfortunately made him the envy and an unpopular figure among some of the guys. One older bully tried to fight Naruto with the intent to prove that Naruto was nobody special just because he was the son of a Sannin. Needless to say, the older bully effortlessly had his ass handed to him after Naruto planted one swift punch into his gut, instantly knocking him unconscious in front of the body of students, some of whom were expecting a long fight. That incident only served to heighten Naruto's reputation among the students who were aware of Tsunade's monstrous strength. They figured that he inherited it from her. Through all this, none of the students or academy teachers for that matter have ever seen Naruto without his ninja mask on. Not one time. Sasuke was another attention grabber among the girls, since he was part of the Uchiha clan. However, his focus at the time was trying to match his older brother Itachi, who was also well known throughout Konoha for his superb achievements. Because of this, he started considering Naruto as his rival, believing that Naruto would reach Itachi's level before he does. Naruto, though, tried to be friends with him. However, Sasuke wasn't interested and instead told him that he has to surpass him in order to match his brother and gain his acknowledgement. It saddened Naruto that Sasuke rejected his offer of friendship. Naruto felt that he and Sasuke could relate to each other in that they were both annoyed at how people considered them of any worth just because of whom they were related to or what bloodline limit they had. Still, Naruto was persistent in trying to gain Sasuke's friendship in whatever way he could. In regards to Iruka, it annoyed him to no end that Naruto would use his class to sleep in and yet have the capacity to pass and even ace his tests. But what did you expect when your mother is a Sannin and medic specialist? Some in the class found it humorous, some of the girls found it cute, one Nara Shikamaru found it troublesome. During the end of the 5th month, the Uchiha massacre occurred. Men, women and children of the entire Uchiha clan were ruthlessly slaughtered in one night with only 2 survivors. These survivors were Sasuke and his older brother Itachi, a former ANBU captain who was responsible for slaughtering the clan and leaving Sasuke alive for unknown reasons before leaving Konoha as an S-level missing nin. Sasuke was crushed and devastated by the horrific event carried out by the one person he held in high regards and wanted acknowledgement from most. Naruto, after learning about the massacre, tried to console Sasuke in whatever way he could. He had little success at first, but Sasuke slowly started opening up to him, although not as much as Naruto would have liked it, but it was a start. Naruto also started talking a little more with Hinata, much to the shy Hyuga's heiress's surprise. He found being around her a bit more relaxing and calm. Naruto saw how Hinata blushed and stuttered often and was clueless as to why. Like in Sasuke's case though, Naruto felt he could also relate to Hinata in that she also didn't like how people considered her or anyone else of any worth just because of whom she was related to or what bloodline limit she who born with. 2 days later. Late that evening, Naruto was training by himself in a training field outside the village. It was one of the training grounds Jiraiya would regularly take him to teach him there. Occasionally Naruto would train by himself till it was late, and sometimes return home only to be scolded by Tsunade for coming home past curfew. He'd usually mumble something along the lines about how does it make sense for a shinobi to be given a nighttime curfew if they're expected to handle serious missions during late hours. In any case, Naruto was working out some steam after being told off by Iruka for falling asleep in class again. "Iruka baka?" Naruto snorted, still feeling irritated. "As if I'm the only one who falls asleep his class. There's that other kid. What's his name? Shikamaru, who constantly gets bored in class and falls asleep as well. And yet I get yelled whenever I fall asleep." Of course, there were other factors that frustrated Naruto. The fact that his right arm would start hurting a lot out of nowhere whether he was sleeping or awake, which has been the case for several months with no satisfying answers to fix the problem added to it. Alongside the fact that on several occasions during the passing months, he'd have realistic nightmares of Kyuubi. These factors were also among the reasons for his pranks and intense solo training. It was to distract him from his problems and frustration, and relieve him of his stress, even if only temporarily. After another 10 minutes, Naruto called it a night and decided to head back home. On his way, though his right arm started hurting again, this a whole lot more than usual. The pain was excruciating as he cried out loudly from the pain with tears falling from his eyes. It was as though his arm was on fire, literally. He pulled his fingerless gloves off, and that was when a burst of chakra came from his arm, from the elbow down to his fingers. The thing about it was that the chakra wasn't blue. It was red. Adding to the pain was the fact that Naruto felt burning sensations on his masked cheeks, as if someone slashed both sides of his face with a 3-clawed gauntlet that was on fire. He pulled his mask down in hopes that the cool breeze would help to calm the pain a little, but it was to no success as 3 jagged-designed whisker marks appeared on both sides of his face. Naruto screamed louder as the power of the red chakra intensified to higher levels till his arms grew heavier and heavier before a quarter-sized circular tear appeared on his palm with some blood now pouring out from it. Unable to hold up his unnaturally loaded arm, Naruto's bleeding hand slammed down to the ground, causing the red chakra to flow into and through the ground away from him into the opening in front of him. Moments later, a glowing seal of some sort appeared on the ground and a mighty burst of white smoke appeared from where that seal was, covering the scene in front of Naruto, giving off a killer intent filled with unparalleled bloodlust. When the smoke cleared, Naruto's eyes widened in sheer fright and terror at what he was beholding before him. It was the very same 9-tailed monster he's been seeing repeatedly in his nightmares. "You're Kyuubi," Naruto barely voiced. Indeed, it was the fearsome Kyuubi no Yoko, wagging all 9 of his large tails in all their glory. The massive beast, seeing Naruto, leaned in closer to him until they were face to face. Detecting a sense similar to that of Yondaime Hokage radiating off Naruto, the great fox narrowed his red eyes venomously as he looked upon the frightened child, whose right was still flared with red chakra. With his deep and inhuman voice, Kyuubi said, "I want to devour you, kid." Back at Konoha, everyone in the village felt that mighty killer intent, one they haven't felt since the death of Yondaime Hokage. The younger generation, this consisting of Haruno Sakura, Yamanaka Ino, the Hyuga children, and all the others, were frightened by the unparalleled monstrous bloodlust, but didn't know what was powerful enough to generate such a dreaded feeling. All of the dogs at the Inuzuka clan were cowering in fear, while the bugs were Aburame clan were in a dreaded frenzy. Elsewhere, Tsunade and Shizen felt that killer intent and they ran outside their house to see where it was coming from. It was no surprise that everyone fearfully stopped whatever it was they were doing upon feeling that killer intent. After sensing where the intense bloodlust was coming from, a look of terror and fear for the worst filled Tsunade's face when a realization struck her. "Naruto!" Tsunade screamed as she ran as fast as she could towards where Naruto was. Shizen followed close by as a number of Jounins and all of the ANBU, and Sandaime himself ran as fast as they could to the direction Naruto and Kyuubi were. 10 minutes later, Tsunade, Sandaime, Shizen, Kakashi, and all the other Jounins and ANBU were making their way to the scene, with the killer intent becoming stronger and fiercer the closer they got. When they almost arrived on the scene, they suddenly saw a burst of unearthly white smoke bathe the entire area, followed by a very thunderous beastly roar. After several minutes of chaos, everything was now serene and calm, and the monstrous killer intent was gone, as if nothing had happened at all. "Is it over?" a confused Shizen asked. Not bothering saying anything, Tsunade hurried to the location only find her son Naruto laying motionlessly face down on the ground unconscious, almost as if he was dead. "Naruto!" Tsunade screamed again as she and the others ran to Naruto. Reaching him first, Tsunade knelt and pulled Naruto to her. Upon seeing his arm, she noticed that his right arm suffered from severe abnormal churka burns. What she also noticed was an unfamiliar seal that was on his right palm, which was glowing and weakly flashing in a bluish glow. The seal looked like a circle that had within it something resembling a circulatory blood system with a symbol similar to the spiral in the center of the seal. Around the outside portion of the seal were 9-star spirals. It glowed momentarily before both it and the seal vanished into his palm and completely out of sight. Turning her attention away from that for now, she looked down at his face and saw that some blood was coming out of his mouth, along with jagged designed-looking facial whiskers, which vanished off his face as though they were never there. She froze at the sight of his blood coming from his mouth, recalling what happened to Kawaki and Dan. Shizune, recalling Tsunade's hemophobia, went over to aid Tsunade and her kid brother. In spite of her fear of blood, though, Tsunade snapped out of her trance and tried desperately to heal him enough to stimulate a pulse, not wanting to lose another precious person in her life again. It would devastate her to no end should she lose Naruto, Sandaime, and Shizune thought. "Don't you dare die on me, Naruto!" cried Tsunade as some tears fell from her eyes and down her face. "You hear me, Naruto? Don't you dare die on me. I already lost one too many important people in my life, and I'm not about to lose you." Sandaime and the others watched as Tsunade did what she could to heal and help her son. After a few moments, a pulse was detected. Though it was weak, but it was enough to make it clear that Naruto was still alive. They wasted no time in bringing Naruto back to the hospital for further medical treatment. If anything, everyone wondered if it was Kyuubi that caused all this, and if so, why did it take off before they arrived on the scene and left Naruto alive? Things just weren't making any sense. 5 days later, Naruto was in the hospital lying on the bed unconscious. His injuries were treated and bandaged, and he had a 4-needle inserted into his left arm. He was still in a coma and hadn't gained consciousness since the incident. Tsunade stayed at his side the whole time, checking on him every now and then. Jiraiya hurriedly returned back after learning about the incident that had the entire village in an upheaval, which Sandaime had to calm with much effort. He explained that an enemy force used some form of advanced and powerful genjutsu to deceive them into believing that Kyuubi has truly returned and set them into mass panic, which would have no doubt left them open to a surprise attack not by Kyuubi but by invading villages or nations. This served to calm the nerves of the people, although he himself was sure for how long. Word, however, about what happened to Naruto spread like wildfire as the villagers gave their condolence to both Tsunade and Shizune. They figured that Naruto must have gotten caught and attacked by the enemy force Sandaime spoke of. During the 5 days, the ANBU went on an all-out search to investigate if Kyuubi was truly in the vicinity of the village or anywhere else. They surprisingly found nothing that would have remotely led to anything indicating where Kyuubi was, or if he's making his return to Konoha to finish what he started 8 years ago. 3 days after the incident, Tsunade brought to Sandaime and Jiraiya's attention about the unknown seal she saw on Naruto's right hand before it vanished into his skin. After giving the Hokage the details of how the seal looked like, both he and Jiraiya went to work to see if there was any information about this mysterious new seal. However, Sandaime couldn't help but think as to why that particular seal Tsunade described to him sounded rather familiar to him, although it certainly wasn't the sealing jutsu Yandaime described to him years ago before he went to battle the Great Fox. Back at hospital, Naruto started opening his eyes to the environment he was now in. After his eyes came into focus, he realized that he was in the hospital. He turned and found Tsunade sitting and sleeping at a table next to his recovery bed on the right side of him. From the looks of it, he saw that she had little rest. He was about to wake her up when he turned his right hand and looked at it. That was when everything came flood back to him. The event at the training ground, to Kyuubi making an unexpected appearance to what he discovered and learned after he fell into a coma. Tsunade groaned as she gradually opened her eyes to see Naruto was now fully awake. "Naruto," Tsunade exclaimed happily as she embraced him tightly. "I'm so happy that you're all right." "Yes, Mom," Naruto choked. "I'm fine, but your hug is crushing me." Embarrassed, Tsunade released Naruto, who gasped for breath. "Naruchan?" Tsunade asked with motherly concern. "Are you hungry? I can go get you some of your favorite ramen from Ichiraku if you want." Not being one to turn down ramen, he accepted. Before she went on her way, Naruto called to her, "Mom!" Tsunade turned to Naruto, who surprisingly had a serious look on his face. "Is it possible for you to get Jizan, Eroji-san, Kakashi-Nizan, and Shizune-chan to come here? There's something very important that I have to discuss with all of you." Tsunade nodded and went on her way, wondering if what her son had to discuss with her and the others had anything to do with what happened 5 days ago. 2 hours later, the people who Naruto requested were now present inside the room with 2 ANBU standing on guard outside the room. The Hokage instructed them that No-one was allowed inside the room until he exited. Meanwhile inside, Tsunade and everyone else were ready to find out why Naruto requested their presence. But in any case, Sandaime and Jiraiya had some news of their own to share in regards to what they discovered about the new seal in Naruto's palm. Breaking the silence, Naruto asked, "Jizan, is it possible to form a soundproof barrier? I don't want what's discussed here to be heard by anyone outside this room." "How do you know that such a jutsu exists?" Shizen asked. Naruto retorted, "Because my father told me just now." Everyone's eyes widened on hearing what he just said. "WW," Sandaime stuttered. "You mean?" "Yes," Naruto replied while giving Sandaime a look requesting to activate the jutsu. Nodding, Sandaime went through a series of hand seals before activating the jutsu. A streak of bluish-white light went around the room before disappearing. Sandaime nodded that the jutsu was complete. Seeing this, Naruto continued, "I'm now aware that Yondaime Hokage, my father Namake's Minato, is sealed inside me." Everyone was silent in the room. They didn't know what to say or think. They figured that Naruto might be angry at them for keeping what they knew a secret from him after all these years. Seeing the looks on their faces, Naruto assured, "I'm not angry at anyone if that's what you're thinking. My father told me everything in regards to the event that happened 8 years old when Kyuubi attacked the village and how both he and Kyuubi got sealed away inside me." Hearing those words sent cold chills down everyone's backs. It was true then. Kyuubi didn't die at all and was in fact sealed into Naruto after all. "I bet you're wondering how both Kyuubi and my father both got sealed away, when my father supposedly was to be consumed by Shinigami after Kyuubi was sealed away. It's a peculiar story really, and it goes back to the time my father was preparing to do the sealing jutsu during his battle with Kyuubi." Everyone listened intently as Naruto related everything he was told to by Yondaime. "When my father was on top of Gamabunta, he started initiating the required hand seals for the Kenjutsu. But before he was able to do the final hand seals, Kyuubi unexpectedly lashed at him, much to his surprise. In a sudden panic, my father raced and ironically formed the last hand seals incorrectly and called out the wrong jutsu, which resulted in an entirely different entity to appear, this one being Chidori Megami." Sandaime and Jiraiya heads shot up on hearing this. "Chidori Megami?" Jiraiya repeated. "I thought she was just a myth at first. That was until I recently did some research on her dash. For your next limited edition of Aika Paradise Books Eroji-san," Naruto interjected and teased, "trust me, she's anything but what guys in their right minds would want to have perverted thoughts of." In spite of the seriousness of the situation in the room, everyone but Jiraiya couldn't help but burst into laughter at what Naruto just stated, much to everyone's surprise. Jiraiya blushed from both embarrassment and annoyance. "How dare you mock my profession, Gaki?" Jiraiya retorted indignantly. "Sorry, but my father egged me into saying that," Naruto admitted. Jiraiya snorted. "I can believe this. Minato, although smart and charming, was also a wise guy much like yourself when he was my student," mockingly Neo Yondaime Hokage. "Seriously though," Sandaime interjected, "Chidori Megami is no myth. She too can be summoned with a master Kenjutsu. However, such a Kenjutsu has been lost for many centuries, and as a result her existence was said to be nothing more than a lost myth. That ended when my father summoned her by a fluke," Naruto explained. "Her kind of sealing is very much different than the one my father found originally, which summons an entirely different and darker entity known as Shinigami." Everyone nodded their heads to Naruto, confirming that they knew what he was talking about. Sandaime started, "Yes indeed. I recall now that Minato did look into finding that Kenjutsu to summon Chidori Megami once before some years ago, but was never able to find it either. After doing some research with Jiraiya on that specific seal on your palm Tsunade told us about, we learned some rather interesting things about it. That very seal on your palm is linked to Chidori Megami's sealing, known as Dorino Suru Fuin no Jutsu, which subjects the sealed into long-lasting servitude. entwining the soul of the sealed with the container's soul as a servant. In exchange for this Kenjutsu's effects, the sealer pays the ultimate price by forfeiting him or herself to Chidori Megami to be permanently sealed away into the same container as well, causing the sealer to have their chakra, knowledge, wisdom, and his or her other attributes to be gradually absorbed by the container over the years. That's exactly what my father told me while I was in a coma, Naruto cut in. I met him in my subconscious mind after I fell into a coma 5 nights ago. He told me everything about himself and Naruto now had tears falling down his face, finding it difficult to speak. Tsunade was about to comfort him when Naruto continued, "My biological mother, Uzumaki Kushina." Tsunade felt a pang in her heart, as she now started having tears build up in her eyes before they descended down her face. She wanted to tell Naruto the truth, but was never able to move herself to do so, fearing what it would do to the mother and son bond she formed with him. Over the years, she really started seeing herself as the boy's mother and him as her real son. She grew strongly attached to Naruto as loving mothers do with their sons. A few soft sobs escaped her throat as her head lowered. This, of course, didn't go unnoticed. "Tsunade-sama," Shizune said consolingly. Tsunade looked at Naruto, making direct eye contact with him. She didn't know whether or not he was angry at her for not telling him the truth after all these years. She was afraid that he'd hate and resent her for it. "Naruto, Tsunade cried. "Don't cry, Mom," Naruto said softly, with tears of his own still fall down his face. It surprised Tsunade that Naruto still called her Mom, and needless to say she found much joy in that. "Although my father told me everything about the kind of person my birth mother was," Naruto continued, "that still doesn't change how I see you. I love you and you're still my mom and you love and take care of me just how my birth mother would have." Overcome with emotions, Tsunade ran and embraced Naruto affectionately as a couple more sobs escaped her throat. These sobs now were sobs of joy. "My little Naru-chan," Tsunade said happily. "Come on," Naruto retorted. "I'm not that little mom." Everyone laughed at the scene, even Tsunade as she wiped away her tears. "Even still," Tsunade said with a smile and blush, "you're still my Naru-chan." Sandaime smiled to himself. He was very happy for both Naruto and Tsunade, as was Shizune, Kakashi, and Jiraiya. Naruto, after wiping away his tears, then said, "My father was permanently sealed away into my stomach, and is gradually having his attributes infused into me. It sounds rather freaky and disturbing though. It's like I'm my own father." Everyone sensed the feeling of nausea that Naruto was feeling at that moment. "It may sound that way," Sandaime retorted. "However, that's not the case. You won't turn into Namikaze's Minato, Naruto. You'll just inherit your father's Kage-level abilities and chakra as you grow up and mature, thus becoming a born Hokage, or Neo-Yondaime Hokage as Jiraiya puts it." Naruto spoke. "Although my father was sealed into my belly, however, Kyubi no Kitsune." Naruto removed the bandages off his right hand and revealed his now fully healed arm and palm. He continued, "Is sealed away into my right hand." That was when the same seal that Tsunade saw the first time appeared. This time everyone saw it. "That's the very same seal I saw and explained to Sandaime-sama," Tsunade exclaimed. "Indeed it is," Sandaime agreed. "I was amazed myself after finding some lost information about that forbidden master jutsu after Jiraiya and I were told about it. The only thing is that we still weren't able to find the series of hand seals for that exact sealing. It surprises me that Minato managed to execute such a jutsu even if it was a fluke. As a result of that same Dorino Surufuin no Jutsu old man," Naruto said, "I have a summoning contract that was instantly made with me the moment Kyubi was forcefully sealed away into my palm." "Intriguing," Kakashi finally spoke after a long silence. "Whereas I have the signed contract to summon dogs, you can summon foxes of different sorts by default as a result of the sealing." "That's right," Naruto confirmed. "But with a lot more chakra, I can also summon the great Kyubi no Yoko himself as my summoning beast. My first time summoning him unintentionally was 5 nights ago." Everyone's eyes widened in shock on hearing that revelation. It was true then that Kyubi truly was out in the opening. After letting the shock setting in, Tsunade exclaimed, "What? But how can that be when Kyubi was sealed away?" "Kyubi was sealed into a lifetime of servitude," Sandaime said. "He's connected to Naruto as his servant. That's the punishment Chidori Megami sentenced that great fox to. That's why Kyubi can't kill me," Naruto added. "Not unless it wants to kill itself at the same time." When Kyubi was first released from inside my hand, he looked at me straight in my face and told me that he wanted to devour me. But then he added that he couldn't because he'd be killing himself in the process since we're linked through the servitude seal. Although I can summon the Kyubi, however, this isn't without a penalty. Kyubi can only be summoned under extreme circumstances, and when I do release him, he only gets no more than 15 minutes as long as my right arm is flared with red chakra. Should that time limit be exceeded after the red chakra has depleted, the flare will turn blue and begin consuming my life force. If that process isn't stopped, then I'll ultimate die along with the Kyubi and my father. That explains the condition we found you in at your training ground, Kakashi said. Naruto nodded his head. Everyone was quiet as they absorbed and processed the new information they were given. After a few minutes, Shizen asked, "What about those horrible nightmares you've been having? If anything, I'm sure Kyubi had something to do with them." "He did," Naruto confirmed. "That was because he was awakening after 8 years of lying dormant inside me. Those nightmares I started having over the course of 7 months were the results of his gradual awakening, and my body was adjusting to his awakening presence, which was why he was able to come out of my arm the first time without my control." "Does that mean that you'll still be having those horrific nightmares?" Tsunade inquired. "No," Naruto answered. "At least I hope not. I hate waking up screaming at night or in the morning for that matter." "Who doesn't?" Tsunade added. "I lost count on the number of times you ran into my room and into my bed seeking sanctuary to confide in. Not that I minded. I'll admit that it made me feel good knowing that you believe I'm your greatest source of protection." With a mock hurt and sad expression, Jiraiya said to Tsunade, "You never allowed me to seek sanctuary in your bed when I had my nightmares. I know I could have made you feel just as good, you know." No one in the room missed the perverted meaning behind Jiraiya's statement. It took all of Tsunade's self-control not to severely hurt and cripple Jiraiya for twisting and perverting her words to Naruto. Kakashi, on the other hand, was giggling perversely while Shizune looked at both Kakashi and Jiraiya in disgust. Sandaime simply shook his head. "That Jiraiya, he'll never learn." Turning to Sandaime, Naruto asked, "Hey old man, since I'm actually a Namikaze, does that mean I can go live in my father's estate now?" "As much as I'd love to let you have your inheritance, however, I can't let you at this time," Sandaime sighed. "You haven't reached the required age to claim your inheritance, and I'm sure Minato told you that he made a lot of enemies in many lands and villages who'd want nothing more than your death should they learn that you're his son." "Aren't I popular already?" Naruto retorted in sarcasm. "This is important, Naruto," Sandaime said seriously. "You are the last one of the Namikaze clan and Minato's surviving legacy. We can't afford to have you killed and your clan completely wiped out." "Naruto." Sandaime sighed again. The Namikaze clan was once a mighty and prestigious clan in Konoha. They specialized in sealing, spirals, creating and mastering new jutsus. "They were that advanced?" Shizune asked. Sandaime nodded to her before returning his attention back to Naruto and continued. "However, because of the war Konoha was in many years ago, the Namikaze clan was nearly obliterated since they all fought in that war, and the Namikaze clan had many enemy clans from other villages and nations that sought their destruction. Originally, your father, the sole survivor of the Namikaze clan, was going to rebuild his clan starting with you. Unfortunately, because of everything that's transpired, it's now your responsibility to not only succeed your father Yondaime, but also rebuild the Namikaze clan as well." Sandaime remained silent as he allowed Naruto to process everything he was told. A couple of minutes passed when Naruto decided to speak again. "So I'm the last of the Namikaze clan? If that's the case, then I'll have to become stronger to rebuild and make an even stronger clan. And I won't go back on my word. That's my way of the shinobi." Sandaime nodded in agreement, turned to Jiraiya. Jiraiya, with this new knowledge we have on that servitude ceiling and its fox summoning jutsu, I'm charging you to have Naruto undergo more training to handle and control that seal along with whatever other training he has to undergo. Jiraiya nodded his head in understanding before turning to Naruto. Looks like we'll be spending more time together with more intense training. Neo Yondaime Hokage. I can hardly wait, Eroji-san. Naruto joked in sarcasm, much to Jiraiya's annoyance, who retorted, just like Tsunade. What else did you pass on to you besides her sarcasm and breast milk? Jiraiya now found his face implanted into the floor with a throbbing large lump on the back on his head. Standing over him was an angry Tsunade with a balled-up fist. Sandaime rubbed his temples and sighed. They never change. Even as adults their age, those two still behave like children. The following day, Naruto was released from the hospital and allowed to return home with Tsunade and Shizune. He was greeted by Hinata and Ino, who were very happy that nothing serious happened to him. Much to his surprise, both girls visited him while he was in a coma. However, due to Sandaime's direct orders to the hospital staff, they were unable to actually go into his room to see him personally, much to their dismay, since two ANBU were posted to guard his door during his stay at the hospital. Secretly, both girls were also seeking to see his face since it's always covered with that same ninja mask of his. They couldn't help but wonder how he looks like underneath that mask, as did several other girls their age for that matter who came to see him while he recuperated at the hospital but denied access to his room. 3 days later. It was a clear and sunny day. Naruto, fully rejuvenated and healed up, was at the training ground with Jiraiya. Naruto, Jiraiya started seriously, you're aware that your new training will be tougher than before. Are you up to the challenge? Have I ever been known for backing down from anything you threw at me? Naruto replied with confidence. I'll take whatever new schooling you'll throw at me and then some. I'm happy you said that, Jiraiya said, because your training starts now. Minato/Yondaime speaking. With that said, on with the FIC. 3 years later. A great deal has occurred within 3 years. 3 months after Naruto's, age 11, new training with Jiraiya, age 49, started, Hiruzen, in his 60s, did something that shocked all of Konoha. He stepped down and retired as Hokage once again after choosing the person who was to succeed both him and Yondaime as next Hokage. He and the council chose Jiraiya to be nominated for the job. However, Jiraiya declined the offer, saying that it would cut into a great deal of his time for his research as well as his training Naruto. Hiruzen didn't need to be a professor to figure out what kind of research Jiraiya was talking about, since he himself read those books of his like many others. After careful consideration, he selected Tsunade, age 49, the slug Sannin and his former student to be the next Hokage. To say that Tsunade was shocked at this would be an understatement. At first she was rather reluctant to take the job, with her reasoning being much different from Jiraiya's. She recalled what befell her grandfather and granduncle, Shodaime and Nidaime, who died young during their reign as Hokage. And there were her kid brother Kawaki and her lover Dan, both of whom sought to become Hokage, and they died young before they could live out that dream. Since then, she started believing that the Hokage job was shit and that only a fool would want to become Hokage. But after adopting Naruto as her new son, she gradually started seeing things differently. She found a reason to risk her life for something she held as very precious, her son and Shizune, age 26, both of whom happens to be her family, and in some respects Jiraiya, Hiruzen and Kakashi, age 25, whom in their own ways were like family to her, although they got on her nerves occasionally. She was stupefied that she out of all people was nominated to live out the role of Hokage. After some coaching from Shizune, Jiraiya, Hiruzen, and surprisingly even Naruto, Tsunade decided to accept the role as Godaime Hokage. Hiruzen soon saw the ironies when he chose the slug Sannin to be next Hokage. Among them was the fact that he was trying to protect Naruto, who is the son and sole heir of Namake's Minato, Yondaime Hokage, who was once the renowned Yellow Flash who was sealed away inside Naruto along with Kyuubi. During his reign as Hokage, Minato's name alone was taboo among many enemy villages and nations, and many of their military battalions were instructed to cut their losses and retreat should they have ever met him in battle. Now Naruto is the son and sole heir of Senju Tsunade, Godame Hokage, the renowned Sannin and miracle healer throughout the entire medical profession in the shinobi world. She's also known as the legendary sucker because she sucks so badly at gambling that it became legendary, and as a result she's in debt to a lot of people she borrowed money from for her gambling addiction. Hiruzen could only hope that her debtors wouldn't turn on Naruto as well. Hiruzen, however, was happy that Naruto didn't grow up pampered and spoiled, as he feared he would have, and Tsunade saw to it personally over the years. Naruto was brought up and trained to be humble and a hard worker and earn what he felt he deserves. Although retired and enjoying it, however, Sandaime still had influence in the council and would act as Tsunade's advisor from time to time. Also, the law he placed upon all of the clan leaders, village elders, and the ANBU who were aware of Naruto's heritage as Minato's son and heir was still in effect, not only because Sarutobi was still acknowledged as Hiruzen, but also because Tsunade wouldn't tolerate anyone endangering her son's well-being. At the Hokage mansion, Naruto had returned home from his training with Jiraiya. Presently, the boy had a busted lip, a bloody nose, and 2 black eyes, and was covered in bruises and cuts all over, and his clothes were ragged and torn. His hair was a mess and covered in dirt. Tsunade, while kneeling in front of him, was healing and tending to the injuries he endured from Jiraiya's training session. His ninja mask had long been removed off his face, for now that was Baka Eroji-san. Naruto cursed mentally before wincing in pain. I ought to file for child abuse and training malpractice on that bum. Don't complain, Naruto, replied Minato. I felt the same way during my time when he trained me. Trust me, it'll pay off. You weren't the one who was beaten to a bloody pulp by a summoned armored toad, Naruto mentally retorted. It wouldn't have happened if you didn't make that scathe remark about how he hasn't gotten any since who knows when after using your ridiculous Oiroke no Jutsu on him, Minato commented. It wouldn't have happened if he didn't stop for every 5 minutes or so during my training to look at half-naked girls at that stream he repeatedly drags me down to for his so-called research, Naruto countered. Like you didn't take an interest in reading a few of his books after stealing Kakashi's rare limited edition, which you read 3 times if I recall, Minato stated. Whatever, Naruto mentally snorted before cutting off his conversation with his father. Since the day Naruto became aware that his father Namake's Minato was sealed away inside his stomach, he often conversed with him about how he could make improvements in all of his abilities. Oftentimes when Naruto seemingly trains alone at the training ground he'd go to with Jiraiya, Minato would coach and guide his progress, and once in a while when he's not too busy, Kakashi would stop by and hang with Naruto and spar with him on occasions. Sometimes Naruto would ask Minato questions about his life before he became Hokage. You really took a hard beating today, Naruto-chan, Tsunade said. You're most fortunate to have been infused with my super strength, although more than half of it is still dormant. If you were anyone else, those injuries would have broken bones, damaged organs, and blood vessels. That makes me feel a whole lot better, Naruto remarked in sarcasm. Tsunade ignored him as she continued healing him. Since her inauguration as Hokage, she left the matters of healings and other medical issues to Shizune and the other medic neens and would enter the medic scene during extreme circumstances. But since this was her son, she'd take care of the matter herself. Although a large portion of my chakra is still dormant inside you, Tsunade stated, we'll have to work on how we can help you tap into it and use it at will. We will, Naruto asked excitedly. Tsunade smiled. Yes, however, as you train to awaken that sleeping chakra and use it to give you immense strength through near-perfect chakra control, you'll have to be very careful about how you use and apply that strength. It's not something to be taken lightly, as that strength is unquestionably deadly if not handled with caution. On the other hand, it can be a powerful asset against almost anyone and anything. What do you mean, almost anyone? Naruto asked. Did you forget already who's bigger and far stronger than you, my little Naruto-chan? Tsunade teased, earning a snort from her son. He retorted, I'm not little, and I'll surpass you in time. Tsunade stuck her tongue out at him playfully and said, We'll see about that. A while later she was done healing him completely. All done. Naruto flexed his muscles and sighed. That's so much better. That's good, Tsunade said. You'll have to be able to do this as a medic nin when I'm not around, especially if you're on the battlefield. Ha! Tsunade stood up and looked her son in the eye seriously. Naruto, Tsunade said pointedly, I know you're feeling sour about what Jiraiya did to you. However, consider what you experienced as a lesson in real-life scenarios. What do you mean? Back in my days when I was much younger, there weren't any medic nins in the battlefield, and as a result, many Leaf Shinobis lost their lives. Among them being my kid brother, who was killed not too long after becoming a genin. Dan was also killed on the battlefield from severe wounds and blood loss. He died while I tried to heal and revive him. Naruto knew that the topic about her little brother and Dan was very touchy subject for her, and he was very cautious about how he approached it. Tsunade wiped away her tears and continued. This is also an important lesson of being a medic nin. It doesn't matter how strong anyone is on the battlefield. Because when their family, friends, or loved ones are on the hospital beds, they can't do a damn thing to help. Fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents and lovers will turn to you to preserve the light in their lives, and in the lives their loved ones by their sides. Do you understand? Naruto nodded slowly. Tsunade continued, Naruto, you're not going to be just a medic nin like my apprentice Shizune. Nor are you just the son and sole heir of Konoha's Yellow Flash, Namikaze's Minato, Yondaime Hokage. You're also my son and sole heir of the legendary slug Sannin, Senju Tsunade, Godaime Hokage, Miracle Healer, the medic nin who can cure anything. That's the image people have about me, and they'll expect the very same of you once your training with me is over. The worst cases that everyone else would quit on will be brought to you, and you'll be expected to do something about it and succeed where everyone else have failed. You're the one who'll inherit the legacies and wills of fire of both your father and my own. Naruto nodded. I understand, Ka-chan. Yet another dimension was added to the reality of being a medic nin. Layers upon layers, there were always new aspects to consider. What's also true, Naruto continued with sincerity, is that not only will I be a great medic nin, I'm also going to be the next Hokage, and a great one like you, Mom, and like all the other Hokages before me. When my time comes, I will protect everyone I love and hold dear to me, and I will risk my life for this village that's been regarded as a treasure to all the Hokages. And I never go back on my word. That's my way of the shinobi. A moment later, and after deep consideration, Tsunade said, I have a gift for you, Naruto-chan. Really? Naruto asked excitedly and happily. What is it? Tsunade removed the necklace off her from around her neck and placed it around Naruto's neck. Naruto was shocked by her gesture. But, he stuttered. This is the very necklace your grandfather gave you. I know, Tsunade said. And that crystal is one of 2 in the world that exist. You can buy mountains with that necklace alone. But keep in mind that with that necklace you carry the legacies of Shodaime and Nidaime, Nawaki, Dan, and the rest of our family ancestors. It's something I want you to take with you on your path in becoming Hokage. Overcome with emotions, Naruto jumped and embraced Tsunade, happily. I love you, Ka-chan. Tsunade smiled brightly as she embraced her son as well. I'm happy you appreciate your gift, Tsunade said before she placed a light kiss on her adopted son's forehead. Now let's start on your human anatomy studies. Yeah, Naruto agreed, and as the mother-son pair went on their way to the medical section of the mansion. And tomorrow you'll spend the day sparring with me, Tsunade added with a large smile. Naruto grimaced on the thought of sparring with his mother Tsunade. For what it's worth, he'd rather spar with Jiraiya, knowing that Tsunade's hits were far worse than his. Hey, Tsunade said, don't give me that look. I did say that we'd have to work on awakening that dormant strength of yours. Didn't I? You did, Naruto whined. But you hit so hard. She grabbed Naruto before wrapping her arm around his neck and giving him a hard noogie. Kei-chan, Naruto cried as he futilely struggled to break free. It's one thing to spar with your freakishly strong mother, but it's something else when she applies that strength for giving noogies. Tsunade laughed while watching her son's predicament. For the past couple of months, Tsunade got into the habit of giving Naruto playful noogies. 2 weeks later, Naruto was sleeping at his desk at the academy again. This time he looked completely drained and exhausted. He spent all night studying his mother's medical scrolls and practicing his healing and medic jutsus, and 3 days earlier, he trained with Jiraiya on controlling his new seal and fox summoning. Naruto was sitting/sleeping between Ino and Hinata. Both girls took pity on Naruto seeing the state he was in. Hinata saw the look in Ino's face and knew what she had in mind. Both girls were tempted to see how he looked like underneath that ninja mask he wore. Hinata blushed at the thought but was too timid to pull it off. Ino, being the more abrasive type, moved closer to grab and pull the mask down when Naruto immediately jumped from his seat and stood in attention. Everyone else laughed at the scene, while Ino mentally cursed and yelled at Irika for ruining her chance to see the blonde's face. "Yes, Irika-sensei," Naruto said. Irika, annoyed at Naruto's sleeping habits, stated, "Do you find our discussion on the 5 Hokages boring enough to put you to sleep? When your Ka-chan is the granddaughter and grandniece of Shodame and Nidame who taught Sandame, who taught my Ka-chan and chose her as Go-dame after the death of Yandame, who was trained by Jiraiya-sama. Another student of Sandame, what more can you teach me about them that my Ka-chan hasn't already taught me?" Irika's right eye twitched from Naruto's sense of reasoning yet well-worded explanation. The fact that annoyed Irika further was that Naruto was right. Ino and other girls chuckled from his explanation. "He's so smart," a couple of the girls thought as they looked at him dreamily. "Well, Naruto," Irika said, "since it's your family we're talking about, it should hold your attention to say the least, since they were the ones who built Konohagakure no Sato and contributed greatly to the medical fields and this village's history." "I'm sorry," Naruto replied. "No disrespect to you or to my family ancestors, but I spent all last night and days prior studying and practicing with little sleep. But if you need my participation, then I'll add my 2 cents into the conversation." "That's good to hear," Irika said, although concerned about Naruto with regards to what he said earlier. "We were just going to talk about Yandame Hokage." "Now that I can do," Minato stated. "I'm sure you can," Naruto remarked. "You're the subject at hand anyway, father." "I'd like to say some things about Yandame," Naruto said as he moved and went to the front of the class. Irika stepped aside and gave Naruto the spotlight. "Okay, Naruto," Irika stated. "What would you like to say about Yandame Hokage?" Looking at the class, Naruto started. Yandame Hokage, whose real name is Namikaze Minato, started off like all of us here. Like some of us, he had no inborn skills or bloodline limit that we know of. After becoming a genin, he became a student to Jiraiya the legendary Toad Sannin along with 2 other genins. Under Jiraiya's tutelage, he gradually started making new advancements. Naruto continued his discussion while holding everyone's attention, including Irika's. The class were amazed at how much he knew about Yandame in such details. The girls just looked at him dreamily, like how they would do with Sasuke. "You'd think Naruto lives with the man," Kiba whispered to Shikamaru, who replied, "How troublesome." "HN?" snorted Sasuke in boredom with his arms crossed. Naruto continued. Years later, Minato became the teacher to 3 genins, these being Hatake Kakashi Nizan, Rin, and Uchiha Obito. Sometime later, though, Obito was killed and Rin left Konoha with no one knowing anything about her whereabouts or what became of her. In all accounts, she's possibly dead. In spite of all this, Kakashi Nizan stayed loyal to Minato and in time became an ANBU around the time Minato became the new Hokage. Before and during his reign as Hokage, Minato became renowned by many as Konoha's Yellow Flash because of a powerful jutsu he created that made him capable of moving like the speed of light. So fast that all you see is a yellow flash of light. He became a mighty force to be reckoned with and feared by many. Minato's name alone was taboo among many enemy villages and nations. Many of their military armies were warned to cut their losses and retreat should they have ever meet him in battle. Minato later married a most skilled, talented, and beautiful kunoichi named Kushina, who was from the former Uzumaki no Kuni, Whirlpool Country. Yondaime was said to have been the greatest of all the Hokages. That was until Kyubi no Kitsune came along and attacked Konoha. This gigantic great fox was unlike any other tailed beast. When his 9 tails were swung, they could destroy a mountain and cause a tsunami. Konoha sent their best shinobi forces to battle the great fox, but they failed to defeat it and many were killed. Things seemed hopeless. That was until Yondaime, the village's champion, appeared to do battle with Kyubi. His presence was a sight for sore eyes to everyone there. What they didn't know, however, was that Minato was planning on sacrificing himself to save this village and everyone he viewed as precious with the use of a powerful and most forbidden jutsu. After his battle, both Kyubi and Yondaime vanished without a trace. His pregnant wife died with the child during the attack. Minato defeated Kyubi, however, a heavy price was paid for it. Since the loss of Yondaime, Sandaime resumed the role as Hokage until my mother, Senju Tsunade, the legendary slug Sannin, was chosen to become the Godaime Hokage. Everyone stared at awe at Naruto, especially Irika, who couldn't think of anything to add to what Naruto explained about Yondaime. Naruto said a lot more than what I would have said, Irika acknowledged while looking at Naruto in astonishment. A few of the guys looked at Naruto jealously, thinking that they could have done better, while some of the girls were thinking how smart and handsome he was. "Thank you, Naruto," Irika complimented, reclaiming control of the class again. "That was a most impressive and detailed explanation you gave about Yondaime Hokage. You really do your studies, I must admit." "I have to," Naruto remarked as he started walking back to his desk, "because Yondaime is the Hokage I plan to surpass." That statement caught everyone's immediate attention, as everyone turned and looked at Naruto as if he was joking. "You," Sasuke mocked, causing Naruto to stop where he was and look straight at him. "Of all people intend to surpass Yondaime Hokage, the man who's said to have been the greatest shinobi and Hokage that ever lived?" "That's right," Naruto replied with unshaken conviction. Sasuke snorted, "Achin, and what do you intend to surpass him in, Dobe?" "In just about everything," Naruto answered with a large smile underneath his mask before enthusiastically adding, "because I'm going to push myself to work harder to become the future Hokage of this village someday." After saying that, he continued on his way back to his seat, with everyone was still staring at him in disbelief. Everyone at that moment saw Naruto in a whole new light. "Naruto has quite an ambition," one of the girls whispered to another, who nodded in agreement. "True, but do you think he can pull such a feat off?" "How troublesome," Shikamaru retorted. In spite of Naruto's attempts in being friends with him, Sasuke still looked at him as his rival and hindrance in getting stronger in order to kill his brother Itachi. Sasuke had no interest in making friends or having a girlfriend. After his encounter with Itachi the night of the massacre, Sasuke's prime focus was to become stronger and advance to higher levels in order to be able to fight and kill Itachi and rebuild his clan. Sakura, one of Sasuke's biggest fangirls, found it charming that there's someone else besides her that studies hard almost all the time. She, like so many other girls, tried to get Sasuke's attention repeatedly, only to be shot down coldly again and again. Though Naruto himself also had fangirls like Sasuke, however, he wasn't cold or harsh towards them, although he'd often run from them. Secretly, though, Sakura wished that Sasuke was Naruto and Naruto was Sasuke. Shino, although indifferent, was aware of Naruto's intelligence and sense of logic. However, he was intrigued at how Naruto's status from being the son of a Sannin to the son of a Hokage didn't go to his head like it would have done to so many others their age. Naruto, however, was still a prankster, and a clever one at that, Shino acknowledged. Although Shino never came out and admitted it, he appreciated that Naruto didn't find him or his family creepy for their use and connections to insects and Kikai bugs, and that he was in fact amazed by it, and for that Shino respected Naruto. Chuji liked how Naruto would hang out with him, Shikamaru and Kiba, and not act so fully of himself. Chuji also liked that fact that Naruto never called him fat or teased him like others have in the past. To Chuji, Naruto was really one of the guys. Kiba, who started disliking Naruto at first, in time took a liking to him, seeing how he has a thing for canines like his family. But after training with summoned foxes, how would a person not take a liking to dogs? Also, Kiba's white dog Akamaru also took a liking to Naruto. Shikamaru, although lazy and non-enthusiastic, respected Naruto, especially since Naruto never blew his spot for sleeping in class repetitiously. However, he found Naruto getting himself in trouble for his pranks and other antics to be rather troublesome. Ino found Naruto to be a mystery. She sensed that theirs was more to Naruto than meets the eyes and more than he let on. He was too intelligent and sophisticated for his age, especially as a strategic prankster and escape artist among the Chunins and Jounins. Over the years, her father, Inoichi, have been pushing her to get to know Naruto for reasons she couldn't quite understand. At first, she figured that it was because he was the son of a Sannin, but after spending time around him, she saw that he was a puzzle she wanted to solve, and solve it she set herself on doing one way or another. She did have a crush on Sasuke for a time, but was eventually turned off by his unchanged harsh and cold demeanor, especially since her father didn't like the idea of her fawning over Sasuke like his other fangirls. Ino saw how Naruto and Sasuke were total opposites of each other. One would have thought that Naruto would have been the arrogant and cold type because of his status in Konoha, whereas Sasuke would have thought to have been the open and humble type, especially after what happened to his clan a few years ago. But it was quite the opposite in fact, which attracted Ino more towards Naruto. A couple of times, Inoichi invited Naruto over to their house. Oftentimes, though, Inoichi would try to fix it in a way that Naruto would be around his daughter for the majority of the time. His wife caught on to this. However, the thought of her daughter being matched with the son of a Hokage was most appealing, so she did nothing to hinder what her husband was trying to do. Instead, she encouraged it. Hinata appreciated how Naruto treated her since the time they became friends. Over the years, he'd spar and practice with her and help point out and correct her mistakes. He didn't look and treat her like she was weak or a disgrace like her family had. In time, she slowly started stuttering less and improved in her skills and speech. Naruto even allowed himself to be used as practice for her Byakugan. On several occasions, though, Hinata suffered from nosebleeds for seeing more than she should have. Naruto, however, didn't know whether or not it was intentional, but he'd tease her about it by asking her if she liked what she saw, only to cause her to blush even redder before fainting from the thought alone. Hinata, however, was surprised that she never tried to see through his ninja mask using her bloodline limit, and whenever she thought about doing it, she'd be too shy to actually execute it. Her father Hayashi was impressed and pleased with Hinata's progress and surprising improvements. He was no fool, though. He knew that Naruto had something to do with it, and as a result, he encouraged Hinata to associate more with Naruto and try to get to know him on deeper levels. Hinata was shocked that her father, as harsh as he could be towards her because of her past failures, was praising and encouraging her, and it was all because of Naruto's influence. Eagerly seeking to heed her father's encouragement, Hinata sought to get to know her major crush even more. Hayashi had even invited Naruto over on several occasions and allowed him to socialize and train with his daughter. Sometimes, Hanabi, age 6, would eavesdrop on them to see what was going on. She didn't know what her father saw in Naruto, besides some weird kid who wore that same ninja mask all the time and seemingly never takes it off. The following day, Naruto and all of the other students were all outside at the practice area. They were all going to practice throwing kunais at human-shaped targets. Some of the students had better time aiming and throwing the kunais than many of the others. When it came time for Sasuke to throw his kunais, he threw them with time-precision accuracy. The girls marveled at how efficient Sasuke was at throwing his kunai right on the bullseye. Naruto stood there quietly as he waited patiently for his own turn while bored out of his mind. Even Eroji-san's training was more fun than this, Naruto thought. Pity that no one knows I'm secretly training with him. Or with me for that matter, also Naruto, Minato added. And Tsunade-sama. True, Naruto thought. Naruto, you're up, Irika announced. Naruto raised his head as he went over to his wooden human target stand. Good luck, Dobe, Sasuke mocked. Naruto ignored him and picked up his kunais. Standing a long distance from the target, Naruto ran back and forth from left to right as he aimed and launched his 3 kunais at intended areas of the target before throwing the last one straight into the bullseye. Sasuke smirked and stated, I made all 4 bullseyes and you only made one. If you were as smart as everyone thinks you are, you'd have stood still and threw your kunais at the target like everyone else. I'm afraid Sasuke's right, Naruto, Iruka commented. If you'd have stood where you were supposed to, you'd have possibly managed to hit more than one bullseye. That may be true, Naruto looked at Iruka and said. However, if you look carefully, Iruka-sensei, if that target were an actual person, each section I threw my kunais at would have meant an instantaneous death. Enemy shinobis won't allow us to get bulls to their hearts. We'd have to know where else they can be effectively taken down. Iruka looked at the target and saw what Naruto was talking about. The first kunai was embedded deep into the forehead, the second straight into the jugular, the third at the liver, and the last one straight through the heart. Naruto executed all this while he was running, unlike the others, Iruka acknowledged. You're right, Naruto, Iruka agreed. For each spot you launched your kunais at, it would mean immediate death for the target. I'm amazed you managed to pull off such a feat and knew exactly when and where to hit it while in running motion. When you study the human anatomy in depth, Naruto said, you learn a thing or two. Iruka sensed that there was more to Naruto than meet the eyes. Aside the fact that he's the son of the Hokage, he wondered if perhaps Tsunade had something to do with this since she was an ace medical specialist. Who is this kid? Iruka wondered as the Ino, Hinata, and the other girls circled around Naruto and praised his accomplishments. Sasuke decided to ignore them until... That was amazing. You might reach or even break Itachi's record at this rate, said one of the girls. Hearing that remark made Sasuke's blood boil. There was no way he was going to be outstaged by Naruto. Sasuke saw that had to push himself harder if he was to become stronger to kill his brother and outdo Naruto, who he felt was supposed to be the dobe, not his equal or superior. If only I had my Sharingan activated like Itachi's, Sasuke thought, then I'd have had the ability to surpass Naruto's abilities. A week later. It was a clear sunny day in Konoha and everyone was taking advantage of the serene atmosphere. Naruto was walking around the village by himself after Jiraiya gave him the day off to allow his body to recuperate from last week's training. Naruto figured that it was just an excuse for him to go about doing his research for his Ica Paradise series. He thought about going to visit Sandaime, but then he remembered that Sandaime went out on a vacation trip with his grandson Konohamaru, age 6, and won't be back for another 3 days. Tsunade was going to be busy all day at the office. Something about diplomats from other villages coming to discuss some trading negotiations. Kakashi was out on an A-rank mission and won't be back for another 2 days, and Shizune was stuck at the hospital with a patient in critical condition. Simply put it, Naruto was down on his luck today. His family was too busy with his or her own things and currently had no time for him. This totally sucks, big time, Naruto thought. Don't feel dejected, Naruto, Minato said. I'm still around. I know, father, Naruto replied. I just need to find something to do to keep me busy, really. You can always go hang out with your friends from the academy, Minato suggested. I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to hang out with you. True, Naruto replied, but many of them are busy today, and the all-omnipotent Sasuke is still with the I must become stronger than you Naruto complex. Then why not invite those 2 girls to hang out with you? Minato said. If anything, Hinata and Ino would more than likely drop whatever it is they're doing in a heartbeat to hang out with you. And I know their fathers would definitely let them without any argument, since both Hayashi and Inoichi know I'm your father. If I didn't not any better father, I'd say you were trying to play matchmaker here. Naruto replied with a grin on his face. Not that I'm complaining. What girl in Konoha wouldn't want to date the son of great Yondaime Hokage? Naruto heard Minato chuckling in his mind. Don't get full of yourself, my boy, Minato advised. Though I may be revered as one of the greatest shinobis, however, when it came to courting your birth mother, I turned into a total idiot and she'd scold me for my love for ramen. She used to say that I love ramen more than how I loved her. Naruto started laughing on hearing what his father had told him, while bystanders looked at him questionably. Meanwhile, Ino was at her parents' flower shop helping her mother tend to a customer with the bouquet of exotic roses he was ordering. While this was going on, Naruto soon entered the shop and greeted them. Hello everyone, Naruto greeted as Ino and her mother turned to him. Ino smiled. obviously happy to see him. Naruto-kun, what brings you here? My folks are all busy today and I had no one to hang out with, he explained. I was going to ask if you wanted to come and spend the day with me, Ino-chan, but since you're helping out with Dash. Actually, Ino wasn't doing much here anyway. Ino's mother suddenly cut. In fact, she can go and hang out with you now. You sure? Naruto asked quizzically. Positive. Mrs. Yamanaka smiled as she gestured to her daughter to go on her way. Ino flashed her mother a thank you smile before running over Naruto, who turned and exited the shop with her. The customer just shook his head at the scene. Young love, the customer thought with a grin. As Naruto and Ino left the shop, out of nowhere they crashed into Hinata. Seeing whom she collided into, Hinata blushed and apologized. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I should have been paying more attention to Dash. Don't worry about it, Hina-chan, Naruto assured. Want to hang out with Ino-chan and me today? Blushing redder, Hinata nodded her head. Ino snorted. She was really hoping it was going to be just her and Naruto. She didn't expect Hinata to have shown up out of nowhere so conveniently and bump into them. So what do you girls want to do today? I don't know, Hinata replied. I was going to go along with whatever you or Ino had in mind. Honestly, I really didn't have much on my mind to do today, Naruto said sheepishly. But I'm sure if we walk around a little we just might think of something. Smooth moves, Prince Charming, Minato remarked in sarcasm. Who asked you? Naruto mentally snorted as he started walking with the two girls at his sides. The trio walked together through the crowd as everyone was going about their business. While they were walking, Ino and Hinata were sharing the same thought. I wonder how Naruto looks like underneath that mask. I never seen him ever take it off. Not once, Ino thought. Before she could say anything, Hinata spoke. And Naruto-kun? Yeah. How about I treat you to ramen? Hinata offered with a sense of innocence. I'll get you whatever kind you like. Yeah. Naruto yelled excitedly. Let's go. Naruto hurried to Ichiraku with Ino and Hinata almost being dragged along with him. Ino wondered why on earth Hinata would treat Naruto to that stuff, although knowing just how much he loves that stuff. That was when a revelation dawned on her as to why Hinata was treating him to ramen. A smile formed on Ino's face. Hinata, that was brilliant. Inner Ino yelled happily. I can't believe how cunning you can be. If Naruto is to eat, he'll definitely have to remove his mask. It's completely simple and perfect. It wasn't long before they reached their destination. The trio sat down together at the bar. Tucci greeted them. Hello, you three, Tucci greeted. What'll you three have? Oh, Hinata said. It's not for me or Ino. We're treating Naruto-kun. Really? Tucci replied in somewhat disbelief before turning to Naruto. You're a very lucky kid, Naruto. I didn't have that privilege back in my days. Teasingly, you must have made quite an impression on these two ladies if they're treating you and not the other way around. Tucci-jizan, Naruto retorted with a blush burned on his cheeks, but was only partially seen from above the mask. Just make one of my favorites. What are you talking about? They're all your favorites. Tucci teased again before making Naruto his bowl. Why aren't you two eating? Naruto asked. I'm not hungry really, Hinata replied with the same sense of innocence. Me too, Ino said. Naruto eyed the both of them. The girls were acting like they had nothing to hide. He wondered what it was they were up to. Several minutes later, Ayam, age 15, came in and greeted, Naruto-kun, I'm happy to see you again. The feeling's mutual. Naruto greeted back, and how are you? I'm okay, Ayam said before asking teasingly, who are your girlfriends? Naruto and both Ino and Hinata both blushed heavily on hearing that. Although Hinata blushed a shade of red neither Naruto nor Ino could possibly match against. Hinata almost fainted from the comment alone, had she not remembered that she'd have fallen off her stool if she did. Ino, on the other hand, thought she could get used to being called Naruto's girlfriend. To my right is Hyugu Hinata and next to her is Yamanaka Ino. They're my classmates from the academy. Ino and Hinata, I am greeted. It's a pleasure to see you too. Naruto is our best and favorite customer here, so you both better treat him right.
Ok.
I am winked at the masked blonde. Naruto sweated dropped. It was as though it was an all-for-one teasing day on Naruto, he thought. Soon Tucci came with Naruto's bowl of beef ramen. Here you go, Naruto, Tucci said as he handed him his bowl and chopsticks. Thanks, Naruto replied happily as he inhaled the steam from the bowl with the chopsticks in his hand. Ino and Hinata looked on at him quietly. Naruto looked at his bowl while feeling two pair of eyes staring right at him. Turning to the two girls, he asked, "Why are you two staring at me?" "We're not staring," Ino replied. "Just waiting for you, that's all." Hinata just fiddled with her fingers as though she was nervously waiting for something. He looked at them suspiciously before shrugging. Turning back to his bowl, Naruto moved his hand to his mask. Hinata and Ino held their breaths as they awaited him to remove it. "Hey Ino! Hinata!" Both girls yelped in surprise as they turned to see Kiba appearing from behind them with Akamaru in his jacket. Chuji, Shino, and Shikamaru followed close by as they entered the small diner. "What are you two doing here?" Kiba asked. Ino replied, "What do you think? We're here hanging with Naruto." That was when both Ino and Hinata turned to face Naruto, who now had his mask back on his face with a satisfied smile hidden inside the mask. The bowl in front of him was completely empty of all its contents. "That was really good," Naruto thanked. "Thanks for the meal, Hina-chan." Although she blushed, however, both girls frowned at how Naruto devoured the ramen with such inhuman efficiency, while missing the chance to see his face without the mask on. "Damn it!" Inner Ino yelled with flames behind her. "We were so close! Damn you, Kiba!" "You mean you both were here treating Naruto to lunch?" Kiba remarked too with a tinge of jealousy. "You two never treated any of us guys to lunch." "How troublesome," Shikamaru stated in boredom. Chuji was busy eating his chips while Shino remained as quiet as ever with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Hey, while we're here," Kiba suggested, "why don't we all get some ramen? It'll be the girls' treat." Kiba suddenly found himself with his face to the ground with a lump on his head in courtesy of Ino, who was now standing over him with her fist clenched tightly. Akamaru whimpered from underneath Kiba, having taken the full brunt of the fall with his master top of him. Ino turned and grabbed Naruto's hand and dragged him out of the diner. "Let's go!" Hinata paid for the food before she got up and apologized for Ino's actions and bowed to her friends before following Ino and Naruto. The lavender-haired girl, she that her plan ended in failure. Chuji and Shino helped Kiba off the floor. "That Ino," Shikamaru mumbled. "She's so troublesome." Meanwhile, Ino was still holding Naruto's hand as she was taking him to practically nowhere. "Exactly where are we going?" Naruto asked after a period of silence. "Anywhere as long as we don't have to deal with boys looking for free meals at our expense," Ino retorted. Ironic really, since it was Hinata who treated Naruto to lunch with the intent on seeing his face, which Ino figured out. "You can let go of my hand now, Ino," Naruto said. "I think it's safe to say that we're in the clear now." Realizing that she was still holding Naruto's hand, Ino reluctantly released it, with a small blush on her cheeks. "Sorry," Ino said. "I forgot myself there for a minute." "That's an understatement," Minato commented. Naruto simply agreed but grinned underneath the mask. "I know where we can go. Follow me." The two girls nodded their head and followed Naruto to where he was going as he started running through the streets. Hinata and Ino made the effort to keep up with him, but he was moving at a speed much faster than theirs. "Naruto-kun," Hinata said, "we're not as fast as you. You can at least slow the pace down enough for us to keep up," Ino added. "Are you kidding me?" Naruto said. "This is slow compared to how fast I can really go." Naruto slowed down enough to allow both girls to catch up. When they reached him, however, Naruto grabbed both of their hands and held onto them tightly as he ran faster with them being made to keep up with his speed. "Naruto!" Ino yelled. a cry that fell on deaf ears as Naruto simply laughed. In spite of this, Hinata just blushed crimson on the fact that Naruto was actually holding her hand. A while later, Naruto, Ino, and Hinata found themselves at one of the training grounds. No one else was there besides them. Both girls were taking in large gasps of air, almost as though they were deprived of oxygen. "Come on," Naruto teased. "How do you both hope to become great kunoichis if you're complaining about being out of breath already?" "Well, forgive us for not possessing your stamina," Ino shot back. "There's nothing to forgive," Naruto replied. "You both will just have to work harder like I do, especially if you both want to maintain those nice figures of yours." That last comment caught Ino and Hinata off guard, as they both blushed and looked away shyly. "He thinks I have a nice figure?" Hinata and Ino smiled and thought at the same time. "Does that mean he likes me?" Naruto smirked as their reactions, breaking whatever thoughts they were daydreaming about. Naruto said, "Hey, who's up for some sparring?" The girls broke out their dreams to look at Naruto incredulously. "Spar with you," Ino said, when inner Ino suddenly said, "This'll be perfect. That way I can yank off Naruto's mask and see how he really looks like underneath it. He must be hiding something if he's always wearing that mask all the time." "I accept," Ino replied. "And you, Hinata," Naruto offered. "You two can double-time me if you want." "He's making this too easy," inner Ino shouted happily as though victory would be quick and sure. "Are you sure, Naruto-kun?" Hinata asked. Naruto replied, "Trust me. Your hits couldn't possibly be anywhere near as hard as Kachan's." "Oh yeah," Ino shouted. "We'll see about that." And with that, Naruto took a fighting stance as the girls did likewise. Hinata activated her Byakugan and assumed the Hyuga fighting stance. Naruto eyed both females cautiously, as they all wondered who was going to begin the spar. "Any time now," Naruto invited. "I don't have all day, so you either come at me or dash." Naruto didn't finish his speech when he suddenly dashed at the girls who were caught off guard by his actions. He did a palm strike to their chest, sending them flying backwards off the ground momentarily before they landed down on the ground in a thud. "I'll come at you," Naruto said with a grin on his covered face. The girls soon got up from off the ground. Ino saw that parts of her clothes and hair now had dirt and bit on grass on them, as did Hinata. "You're gonna regret that," Ino declared as she and Hinata readied themselves to attack. "Come make me, girlfriends," Naruto taunted while doing a hand gesture inviting her to come at him. Ino and Hinata charged at Naruto at full throttle, throwing as many punches as they could at him. Naruto simply dodged and evaded every last one of them as though he was taking a walk through the beach. During this process, Ino made several attempts to grab and pull off his mask, but he was too fast for her to make contact. He jumped away from them, but Hinata followed in hot pursuit. Stopping, Naruto charged at Hinata and threw fast punches, kicks and palm strikes at her. Hinata dodged, blocked, ducked, and evaded his attacks as they came, and she threw punches and kicks of her own. Ino soon came and rejoined Hinata in battling with Naruto. If one was looking carefully, you think Naruto was dancing ballet with both girls at the same time, seeing how fluid and swift his movements were. Naruto soon started moving faster, making it harder for Ino and Hinata to keep up. Sudden as Ino and Hinata charged as him, he dashed past them at a speed their eyes couldn't see. Seconds later, they found themselves falling to the ground flat on their faces. When they tried to get back up, however, to their horror they saw that their legs didn't work anymore. My legs," Ino cried as she tried to push herself off the ground. "I can't feel my legs." Hinata was in shock at what just befell them. Did Naruto cripple them? She wondered. It was supposed to be a friendly sparring match. Naruto walked over to them and with his index finger, he hit a certain section on their backs. When that was done, he stood in front of them with a grin on his masked face. "Ino-chan, Hina-chan, you two can stand up now," he said. "Is that some kind of joke?" Ino barked. "This is all your fault. We can't move our legs." "Really?" Naruto said as he moved and grabbed one of their 2 feet, removing their sandals before tickling their feet. Ino and Hinata laughed hysterically as they struggled to break free, senselessly not realizing that they were kicking Naruto with their other free foot. Naruto released them and said, "Your feet seem fine to me if you both can kick that hard." That was when they realized that they could indeed move their legs after all. Putting their sandals back on, Hinata asked, "Why was it that we couldn't move our feet for a moment?" "Pressure point," Naruto answered. "I hit one of your pressure points, cutting off your brain's sensory to your legs, thus momentarily laming you both. After I unlocked it when I hit your backs a second time, were you 2 able to stand and walk again? And for the record, during our match, I could have done that the entire time." Ino and Hinata were left speechless. Exactly how advanced a fighter and shinobi was Naruto if he was capable of something like this? This only served to induce Ino and Hinata to learn more the blonde braided ponytail shinobi. "Well, I had fun," Naruto smiled. "Thank you Hina-chan and Ino-chan for showing me a good time. How about I drop you both home?" "Naruto-kun," Ino said. "Yeah. Hinata and I have been meaning to ask you this. What's with that mask you wear all the time? Do you have something to hide, or do having some kind of disfiguration you don't want people to see?" "You two want to see what's under my mask," Naruto said. "If that's the case, all you had to do was just ask." Hinata and Ino looked at him stupefied, as though they were thrown into a loop. "That's it!" Inner Ino exclaimed. "That was all we had to do." "You two want to see underneath this mask?" The 2 females nodded eagerly. "All right then," Naruto sighed as he moved his hand to his mask. Ino and Hinata pictured several variations of how Naruto would look like based on their own ideas of what makes a guy look really cute. Upon reaching his mask, Naruto pulled it down to reveal. "Another mask!" Ino shouted in disbelief before her, and Hinata went into a daze and fell backwards. Naruto chuckled to himself as he went over and picked up both girls, carrying each of them over his shoulders as he walked off with them back to the village. Too bad they didn't ask to see underneath the second mask, Naruto thought with a smile. They'd have seen my face that time. Oh well. An hour later, Naruto was standing on top of the roof of one of the buildings. Both girls were still knocked out. He gently set Hinata and Ino down before picked Ino up again, carrying her bridal style this time as he made his way to her house. After dropping her off to her father Inoichi and explaining what happened, Inoichi took and carried his daughter to her bedroom after giving his goodbyes to Naruto. With that task done, Naruto then hurried back to Hinata. Reaching her, he lifted and carried her bridal style and hurried to the Hyuga compound. 30 minutes later, Ino opened her eyes and found herself back in her bedroom. She sat up and asked aloud, "What happened? I don't remember coming back here." A minute later, the door to her room opened. She turned and saw her father entering the room. "Ino, you're awake," Inoichi smiled. "Naruto carried you back all the way home. He said that you and Hinata wore yourselves out to exhaustion while sparring with him. The boy must have some stamina to be able to go toe-on-toe with you 2 girls and then carry you both all the way home after you and Hinata passed out. From what he told me, both you and Hinata made quite a team, giving him a good fight. He said that you girls should spar with him again sometime." Ino knew why she and Hinata passed out and was surprised that Naruto covered for both her and Hinata. She couldn't imagine the embarrassment she'd have experienced were Naruto to tell her father what really happened, although most of what Naruto said was true. For Inoichi, his only regret was that he didn't have his camera with him upon seeing his sleeping daughter being carried home by Naruto. He'd have never let her hear the end of it. Meanwhile, Hinata had already woke in her room, surprise in her expression. She wondered how she got back as she got up and left the room only to see Niji, age 12, making his way toward her room. "Hinata-sama," Niji greeted with a cold demeanor. Hinata partially fidgeted, but not like she used to. "Niji-Nizan," Hinata replied back. "You finally woke up," Niji said. "Naruto-sama carried you back here." "He did?" she asked with a reddened face that held a small smile of joy. Carried me all the way back here? Yes, and he dropped off Ino as well. He explained to Hayashi-sama that you and Ino were sparring with him until you and Ino wore yourselves out to the point that you both passed out. Hayashi-sama was most pleased with the details Naruto provided him with about your style of fighting. Hinata was in her own world now. Not only did Naruto carry her all the way home, but he put a good word in with her father. Had Naruto told Hayashi as to why she really passed out, she could only wonder how her father would have reacted. Still, she knew she gave Naruto a good spar, as she usually tries to do whenever they spar together. I'll be on my way now, Niji said with same demeanor as he turned and walked off, not giving her a second look. Niji couldn't believe how Hinata had improved from the way he remembered her to be. Still, Niji believed that fate can't be changed, and that Hinata, in spite of her evident improvements, won't change at all. Elsewhere, Sasuke was walking through town with Sakura following close by. He sighed to himself that Sakura wouldn't leave him alone for once. As this was going on, they soon saw Naruto walking towards them from the opposite direction. Hey Sakura, Sasuke, Naruto greeted. Hey Naruto, Sakura greeted back. Where are you coming from? Just came from dropping Ino and Hinata off at their homes after spending the day sparring with them, Naruto answered. Those two were relentless. HN, Sasuke snorted. At least those two girls know how to spend their time, rather than wasting it being flirts like some annoying pink-haired fangirl I know of. Sakaru made a mental note to get all of the details from Ino about what happened. It was definitely something she had to get the latest info on. Well, I have to be going, Naruto said. Kachan and Shizunichan said they'll be home around this time. See ya. With that, Naruto continued on his way home, leaving Sasuke and Sakura. So Sasuke-kun, Sakura said, you want to spar with me sometime? No, was all Sasuke said coldly as he started walking off, leaving Sakura behind. Dejected, Sakura's head slumped as she wondered why Sasuke was always so cold towards her. I sometimes wish Sasuke-kun could be more like Naruto, Sakura thought. All the while, two figures with ceremonial bamboo hats wearing dark black robes with red clouds drawn around their robes were standing on the roof looking down at Naruto as he happily made his way back home at the Hokage mansion. So that little blonde kid is the one? Asked the taller shark-faced figure with a large bandaged sword carried on his back. Yes, replied his partner with his fully developed Sharingan activated. Looking at Naruto with narrow eyes, he's the one our organization wants us to bring back, but we'll wait a while longer. The shark man simply nodded before they vanished from the roof. Chapter 11. Troublesome Times. A week later. A week ago, Naruto told his family about his time with Ino and Hinata after they treated him to lunch and sparred with him. Jiraiya was rather amused at the fact that Naruto had two girls who were interested in him and not just as everyday typical fangirls. Tsunade and Shizen weren't surprised at all. Tsunade, though, teased her son at how he would grow up to become a true ladies' man. Jiraiya, being who he was, told Naruto that he would give him some copies of his rare limited edition Ika Paradise books showing how he could give Hinata and Ino a really good time. This of course earned Jiraiya a free flight into the Hokage monument in courtesy of an enraged mother named Tsunade. Sandaime was also told the story by Naruto after he returned with Konohamaru from their vacation away from Konoha, and in turn Sandaime told Naruto about his fun time away with his grandson. Although Sandaime didn't voice it, he saw it was a chance for Naruto to revive and rebuild the Namikaze clan and re-establish it as one of Konoha's strongest clans once again after he becomes of age to marry. Sandaime grinned inwardly, knowing fully well that if word was to ever get out that Naruto is not only the son of Godame Hokage but also the biological son of Yondaime Hokage, Naruto would have to run for hours as armies of girls and possibly older kunoichis would chase after him, screaming for him to marry them and allowing them to birth his children. Present day, at the Hokage mansion, Tsunade and Naruto were looking at each other with narrow eyes, awaiting the other make the first strike. Kakashi, Shizune, and Tsunade's new pet pig Tun-Tun, which she was carrying in her arms, were watching the duo, wondering how this mother and son duel would end. Neither of the two opponents was willing to back down. It's not too late, Ka-chan, Naruto warned. There's still time to back down. Like I'd ever submit to you, Tsunade retorted with unbroken determination. I'm not afraid of you. It's your funeral, Naruto replied. Your move. I'll match you. Full house. Kid. Tsunade grinned smugly. Putting down her cards on the table both her and Naruto were sitting at, Naruto made a hum sound and proceeded to look at his cards at great length, shuffling them around. Mother and son were going for broke in this game. Well, the impatient Hokage finally said, what do you have? I have a bunch of red guys, a 10, and an ace, Naruto said, putting down his cards. That's good, right? Tsunade stared dumbfounded at the royal flush of hearts. She hadn't gotten one of those in her many years of gambling. For Naruto, this was his form of payback for all the hard hits Tsunade would inflict on him during the times he'd spar and train with her. What? Tsunade shouted, finding it hard to believe that she lost to her son. Again, you cheated. I didn't cheat, Ka-chan, Naruto replied. You are the sucker after all. You simply suck, and it's legendary at every casino you drag and take us to. The fact that we're not in the poorhouse or homeless for that matter because of all the loans and debts you've acquired is nothing short of a miracle. Kakashi was futilely stifling a laugh that was threatening to break free. It was amusing how Naruto had the guts to talk to Tsunade like that, knowing fully well that he was risking her wrath. Shizen, however, was torn between being upset that her little brother was gambling and being pleased that he was so good at it, which was a lot more than what could be said of her sensei, who was presently fuming at yet another loss to her smart-mouthed son. You little brat, how dare you, Tsunade stated in indignation. For that, tomorrow when we spar, I'm going to kick your ass twice as hard. Naruto grimaced at the anticipation of being bruised up and beaten on a more harsher level. Just give me my money, so that the next we gamble, you'll start off twice as broke. And so it began, mother and son verbally battling it out for supremacy. Shizen shook her head before letting out a sigh. Gambling was a habit that she was hoping Naruto wouldn't pick up on. Sad to say, some of her sensei's bad habits and temper rubbed off on him, and whenever those two gambled against each other, it always ended with them arguing. It amazed Shizune, though, that Naruto acquired Tsunade's super strength and not her bad streak at gambling. Kakashi was aware of how hard Tsunade could be on Naruto when it came to training and sparring with him. For what it's worth, Kakashi definitely didn't want to switch places with him. 2 weeks later, Naruto and Jiraiya were back together at the training ground. Jiraiya was most pleased with the amazing progress Naruto had been making over the years. His intelligence, fighting style, speed, strength, and stamina was currently Sannin level. Naruto, though, was yet to reach Kage level. Along with everything else, he was being trained in by Minato, Jiraiya, and Tsunade, but was making progress in doing so in mind and body. And speaking of Tsunade, Naruto winced at the memory of his spar with his mother 2 weeks ago. True to her word, the Hokage inflicted kicks, punches, and headbutts on him that were indeed twice as hard during their sparring session. He lost consciousness after the brutal sparring was over. Although Tsunade fully healed him, he'd cringe a bit from just remembering the event. He was amazed that he didn't die from the experience alone. Now I know how Eroji-san feels whenever he's beaten up by Ka-chan, Naruto thought. Ka-chan is such a sore loser. Okay, Naruto, Jiraiya started. Today I'm going to teach 2 new jutsus, but first I'm going to talk to you about elemental jutsu. Elemental jutsu? That's right, Jiraiya stated as he looked directly at Naruto. There are 5 elements that form the basis of everything in the world: earth, fire, wind, water, and lightning. The 5 great nations and hidden villages match to these elements. Sunagakure is in Wind Nation, whereas Konohagakure is in the Fire Nation. Naruto responded, nodding his head. Everyone is aligned to a particular element, and whenever they use ninjutsus of their primary element, it's easier to control and is stronger. Primary element? Naruto asked with curiosity. Take, for example, the Uchiha clan. In the past, their primary element was fire. When they used jutsus that were fire attacks, They were stronger and had easier time controlling those attacks than other elemental attacks they knew of. How do you know they were a fire elemental clan? Naruto asked. We test for elements to learn what element we are. At that, Jiraiya pulled out a thin card from his pocket and handed it to Naruto, who grasped it as he looked at it questionably. What do I do with this? Simply channel chakra into the card, and it will show you which element you are, Jiraiya instructed. Nodding, Naruto channeled his chakra into the card, which ripped in two. Interesting, you're a wind elemental just like your father Minato. Seems you're a real chip off the old block, Jiraiya smirked. Leaf Nines who are primary wind elementals are very rare, and since that you're a wind elemental, that makes it easier for me to teach you this seal-less jutsu. A seal-less jutsu? Naruto repeated in disbelief. I never heard of such a jutsu. Grinning, Jiraiya focused chakra into his right hand and compressed it into a fist-sized ball. Rasengan, Jiraiya yelled out as he launched the deadly attack at a tree. Upon impact, the tree burst into sawdust and millions of tiny splinters. Naruto's eyes widened upon seeing the devastating power behind such an attack. Wow! Naruto shouted in amazement. That was incredible! It is a powerful attack. It's one of your father's trademark attacks which he created. Naruto's eyes widened again on hearing this revelation. He knew that his familial ancestors were experts in creating and master jutsus, but he never once thought that seal-less was possible. My father created that? Yes, Jiraiya confirmed. It took him 3 years to create and master it. 3 years to create and master, Naruto repeated in disbelief. That's right, and it took him 4 months to teach it to me. I don't know how long it'll take you to master it, but hopefully it won't take as long as it did your father and me. Naruto nodded before Jiraiya continued. I'll explain and demonstrate how the Rasengan is done. After that, I'll teach you Shunshin no Jutsu.
Sunshin no Jutsu.
Yes, Jiraiya said. It's a D-class teleportation jutsu that uses a jutsu marker placed on either the human, object, or the location the user seeks to go to. Shunshin doesn't emit any signature. The user simply vanishes and can only travel to one target. Minato, however, created an ever stronger and more advanced jutsu, this being the Hiraishin no Jutsu, which is an S-class jutsu. This jutsu earned your father the name Konoha's Yellow Flash, as you already know. Unlike the Shunshin, Hiraishin uses the tri-tipped kunai and formula seals to allow the user to travel to where the kunai is. However, it also permits the user to travel to another kunai of the same type. Hiraishin emits a yellow flash when used. This technique is particularly effective on large numbers of enemies. During his time as Hokage, Minato would simply distribute his special kunais to ally ninjas and tell them to throw them at different targets at the same time, then simply teleport to the locations and finish off his opponents. This attack can literally defeat a whole army almost instantly. Do you know how to perform the Hiraishin? Naruto asked with eagerness to learn that jutsu. That's a trademark jutsu your father never taught me, since Hiraishin consumes a lot of chakra. Shunshin, on the other hand, consumes less chakra than the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Naruto nodded with a smirk. He could only imagine the kind of monkey business he could cause after learning the Hiraishin. Naruto was about to say something but suddenly passed out and fell to the ground. Caught off guard by this, Jiraiya ran over to Naruto and checked to see if the boy was all right. He examined him and saw that nothing was thrown or shot at the boy, but that Naruto mysteriously slipped into a state of unconsciousness. In Naruto's subconscious, Naruto was standing before Minato, who was locked behind steel gates like Kyubi, a piece of paper that had word seal inscribed on it in kanji place on the gates. The environment was a surprisingly clean hallway with many pipes that connected gates that locked Minato away. Surprisingly, it didn't look like a sewer like it does with regards to where Kyubi is sealed. How did I lose consciousness? Overexcitement about learning my trademark jutsus, Minato answered. Didn't know I was that excited? Naruto replied sheepishly while scratching the back of his head. Don't get any ideas, Naruto, Minato spoke sternly. The Hiraishin is a very power jutsu and is not to be used as one of your playthings for any of your mischief. You're no fun, Naruto snorted. For that, Minato decreed, I'll teach you the Hiraishin at my discretion, since I'm the only one who knows the secret of how to create those tri-tipped kunais and formula seals needed for that jutsu. Be that as it may, father, Naruto shot back. I'll learn it from you eventually, since I'll be absorbing your knowledge away. I'll be a force to be reckoned with throughout the elemental shinobi nations and all other nations everywhere. I'll become the Rokudaime Hokage, known as Konoha's Yellow Flash Prankster. Naruto started visualizing himself as a Hokage pulling huge pranks on everyone at lightning speed, much to Minato's displeasure, as he banged his head against the bars of his prison a few times in frustration and aggravation. He, entered a new and monstrous voice. That kit will make a mockery out of you yet, Minato Baka. I don't recall inviting you into this conversation, Naruto interjected. Naruto would occasionally hear Kyuubi speak to both him and Minato, mostly to insult, ridicule, and get on their nerves. Like I give a damn, Kyuubi retorted. I have no one else to harass but you two idiots. You can thank your idiot father for that. And while we're on the topic, Kyuubi, Naruto said, since you're living in my body, you owe me rent. What? I've been giving it a lot of thought for the past few weeks, Naruto continued. My father spoke with me about the limited amount of chakra I possess, even with his own chakra feeding my reserves. And from what I've learned, you're the only tailed mystical beast that's said to have unlimited chakra. So as rent payment, I'll take your chakra. You insolent little mortal. How dare you? You're bound to me through the servitude seal, Kyuubi, like it or not. Either you learn to coexist with my father and me or die alongside us should anything to me. You have a lot of nerves threatening me like this kit. You surprise me. Meanwhile, Jiraiya just stood just as he looked at Naruto funny. Naruto's facial expression was changing from happy to annoyance to frustration to anger to triumphant and so on. The Sannin figured that Naruto must be talking or arguing with his tenants, and from the looks of it, Naruto got the upper hand in the end. 6 days later, Naruto was by himself at the training ground he and Jiraiya would normally train at. He was practicing jutsus Jiraiya was teaching him, these jutsus being Rasengan and Shunshin no Jutsu. Yondaime, however, held back from teaching Naruto the Hiraishin no Jutsu until a later time. He didn't feel Naruto was ready for that S-rank jutsu just yet. Thus far, Naruto had problems making the Rasengan and failed multiple times in creating a perfect one. He suffered severe chakra burns as a result of his repeated failures and had to resort to healing his hands before calling it quits until later. His use of the Shunshin no Jutsu had improved better than him creating the Rasengan. However, Naruto was seeking to perfect his Rasengan, and the fact that he didn't get it quite right yet angered him. In his frustration, Naruto thrust and punched his right fist into a nearby tree, effectively uprooting and collapsing the tree with some wood chunks spreading over the ground. Take a break, Naruto, Minato advised. You'll burn yourself out from chakra exhaustion. Besides, you still don't know how to control Kyuubi's chakra perfectly either, and if you're not careful, Kyuubi's chakra will send your chakra control straight to hell. I don't see you doing any better in helping me in that department, Naruto retorted. What was that? Minato replied indignantly. If I weren't stuck here inside you, I'd have smacked you across your head for that remark. Having your voice in my head is punishment enough as it is, Naruto countered. Shut up, the both of you, Kyuubi spoke up. My mistake, Naruto thought. Kyuubi's voice in my head is far worse. Impertinent human, Kyuubi roared. I am the great Kyuubi no Yoko, the strongest and most fearsome of the tailed beasts. I'll do well to remember that. Fearsome servant, Naruto remarked in mocking sarcasm before hearing Kyuubi roared angrily while thrashing himself against his cage. Damn you, Naruto, and your bastard father for sealing both us into you, cursed Kyuubi. If I had my way, I'd devour both you and your father and feast upon your marrow. Idle talk. Don't waste my time, Naruto stated before cutting off his mental connection with Kyuubi and Minato. Naruto went over to a shaded tree where his backpack was at and sat down underneath it, appreciating the shade it provided. While doing this, he opened his backpack and took out some food Shizun made for him, which was some rice balls and fried fish. After eating his food, he started playing the one of his kunais he bought from Tenten's, age 12, folks' weapon shop. From what Naruto knew of her, Tenten has a major crush on Niji, the arrogant Hyuga who Naruto believes was born with a sharp ice stake shoved up his ass. Frankly, Naruto isn't all that fond of Niji, and several times he was tempted to put Niji in the emergency ward in the hospital after seeing how he treats and talks to Hinata. One day he nearly did so after seeing how Niji was verbally demeaning Hinata. Had it not been for Hayashi's intervention in stopping the fight between Naruto and Niji before it happened, Naruto would have more than likely succeeded in hurting, if not crippling, Niji with brutal efficiency. The Hyuga clan leader assured Naruto that he'd deal with Niji accordingly. Naruto also was aware that Tenten practically idolized his mother Tsunade as one of the greatest kunoichis alive and hopes to one day be like Tsunade. Tenten had occasionally pestered Naruto about putting some good words in for her to Tsunade in hopes of getting into Godame's good graces so that she might one day decide to teach her something. To Naruto, Tenten's repeated talks about how she'll one day be a great kunoichi like her idol Tsunade was, as Shikamaru would put it, troublesome. Meanwhile, back at Konoha, Ino was in her bedroom looking at herself in the mirror. Ever since Naruto complimented both her and Hinata about how they both have nice figures, Ino has been obsessed with how to keep her body shape up and still be a skilled kunoichi in Naruto's favor. Ino still remembered how Sakura came running to her house a week ago, begging for all of the info about her day spent with him and Hinata after finding out from Naruto that he hanged with them. Since it was her best friend, Ino had no trouble in relating everything that happened and how both her and Hinata attempted to get Naruto to remove his mask and failed. Sakura though squealed when Ino told her how Naruto carried her back home bridal style in his arms after she passed out from that mask stunt. He pulled on both her and Hinata. She also added that her father teased her about it and only wished he had his camera at the time when Naruto brought her home. The sight of them together like that was so cute, her father told her. To no surprise, Sakura found the whole idea downright romantic. While this was on her mind, Ino's thoughts then shifted towards Hinata. It was no secret to anyone that the Hyuga heiress has the hugest crush on Naruto. She practically liked him since day one during their early days at the academy. She wondered if Naruto was aware of this and liked her just as much. She shook the thought out of her head, not wanting to think that a girl like Hinata would pose as a challenger for Naruto's affections. Ino wasn't worried about Sakura, who was too into Sasuke. For what it was worth and what she saw for herself over the years, and especially during her sparring match with Naruto, Ino felt that Sasuke didn't measure anywhere near Naruto's potentials and capabilities. With that thought in mind, Ino wondered if she measures up to Naruto's expectations as girlfriend material. She knew that Hinata would work towards that goal, especially after seeing the gradual changes in Hinata's character over the years as a result of her association with Naruto. With that realization in mind, Ino told herself that she'd have to improve herself in everything if she was to win Naruto over. Meanwhile, Hinata was walking about through the village in hopes to find Naruto. She wanted to tell him about how her training session with Hanabi went and how both Hanabi and herself have improved over the past few weeks. Kurenai, age 25, who's been like a mother figure to the Hyuga heiress, was happy to see how Hinata have changed from the closed-in, shy girl she used to be. She was even more surprised to see how Hayashi has changed a bit from how he used to treat Hinata. The rookie Jounin wasn't sure how the changes were happening, but needless to say she was happy they were. While Hinata went on her way, two mysterious figures in black robes with red clouds drawn on the robes and ceremonial bamboo hats on their heads walked past her. She felt a cold vibe travel down her back, much to her fright. After a few moments, she turned and saw the two figures were gone, almost as though they were never there. The Hyuga heiress continued on her way to find her crush. However, the feeling that she felt from those two left her highly troubled. 30 minutes later, Ino stepped out of her parents' house and started on her way towards Sakura's house. While on her way, her eyes came upon two unknown figures whom she never seen before. Something about them told her that they were bad news. As she followed them briefly, they vanished and went elsewhere. Ino stood there dumbfounded without a clue as they whom those two were. But if anything, she had a bad feeling about them. Pushing that though to the side, Ino saw that following those two mystery men threw her off track from Sakura's house. Seeing this, she turned and started back. While on her way, she soon came across Hinata. Going over to her, Ino decided to greet her friend/rival. Hinata, Ino greeted. Hinata looked to her side and saw the Yamanaka girl coming her way. Hi, Ino, Hinata greeted back. Where are you off to? Ino inquired. I was on my way to find Naruto-kun. I've been looking for him all day. All thoughts on heading to Sakura's house vanished on hearing this revelation. Really? Ino asked. I can't say I've seen him myself either, besides seeing two weird-looking guys in black robes of some type. Hinata's head shot on hearing this. Did they happen to have red cloud designs on their robes with ceremonial hats on their heads, with one of them have a really large sword covered in bandages? They did, Ino answered in surprise. How did you know? I saw them earlier also. I thought I was imaging things at first, but it seems that I wasn't seeing how you yourself also saw them. Any idea as to whom they are? Hinata shook her head. After a moment of silence, Hinata said, Well, I'm going to see if I can find Naruto-kun. Hold up, Ino interjected. I'll come with you. I'm sure we can find him faster if we work together. Seeing no harm in that, Hinata went along with Ino in search of Naruto. Later, deciding to call it quits for now, Naruto started on his journey back to the village in hopes of getting some pork ramen from Ichiraku's. After 20 minutes while on his way, he soon picked up on two chakra signatures approaching him. Stopping, he turned and saw two figures standing behind him, one with a human face and the taller one with shark-like features carrying a large bandaged sword on his back. Senju Uzumaki Naruto, I presume, said the short figure. Cautiously, Naruto asked, Who are you? We'd like for you to come with us, said the shorter figure. Our organization is keenly interested in you. Thanks but no thanks, and besides my mother told me to never talk to strangers, Naruto replied in sarcasm. You got good jokes, kid, said the shark man. But it would save us the trouble if you'd simply accompany us back. And why should I? Naruto asked. We already made our presence known to two young girls who seem to hold you in high regards, stated the shorter figure. This set Naruto on full alert, although he maintained a calm outward demeanor. What did you do to them? They're in good health for now, replied the shorter figure. Just then the taller figure stepped to the side towards a large tree. He came back, carrying two people whom Naruto knew all too well. Hina-chan, Eno-chan, Naruto cried out after seeing that both girls were tied up and gagged so they wouldn't scream. Their hands were also tied behind them and their legs were also tied together. The taller figure dropped both captive girls down to their knees. Naruto's eyes narrowed dangerously at the two men. If anything, he didn't take kindly to people threatening his family or friends. What's your name? Naruto asked the leading figure. Removing his hat, the figure allowed Naruto to see his fully developed Sharingan. Uchiha Itachi, age 16. Naruto's eyes widened upon seeing the S-class criminal in front of him. He heard and learned many things about Itachi from Jiraiya and Kakashi, and he was aware of the fact that he was the one who slaughtered the entire Uchiha clan by himself at the age of 13. Itachi became one of the most hated figures in Konoha. Sasuke's detestable older brother, Naruto said with distastefully, the Uchiha prodigy. Itachi remained silent. The second figure moved his hat and also introduced himself. I'm Hoshigaki Kasame. Another S-class criminal wanted for murdering a daimyo and many crimes in other villages and nations. Seeing that their forehead protectors had a gash across them meant they were also missing knees. Naruto though knew that those two men in front of him weren't small-time chumps and he wasn't about to underestimate them. At the same time though, he didn't want to jeopardize Ino and Hinata's safety. It went without say that both Hinata and Ino were afraid now. We simply want you to come back with us without incident, Itachi said with a calm demeanor. Naruto knew this was a bad situation. He had to think of something and fast,